TikTok, time to rock. I'm your friendly neighborhood philosopher, Mike Jones here. Hope you guys enjoyed the brand new open. I spent all morning working on there.
Powerful.
Hours putting that
is
together.
the best. That is the best intro music I've ever seen from anyone.
I have to say, I am stunned. I am very impressed. This is the best intro music I've ever seen.
Yeah, and can we say, AP, both of us, a bit jealous of that intro?
Yeah, I wish I had something as great as that. Yeah.
Did you compose the music yourself, Mike?
Yeah.
I sure did. That's me humming. Yeah.
and can we say the brilliance of that little catchphrase or whatever you want to call it? TikTok, time to rock. I mean, TikTok, time to rock. Oh man, it rhymes. It's perfect.
Coming up
it's amazing.
I'm on fire today, guys. I don't know where I'm getting all this from. So, welcome everyone. I am joined with one of the biggest YouTubers around, Exploring Reality, and then two other guys. What is it? Ridvan David, I think? I don't know. But no, I am here with the apostate cowboy, David Wood, and Exploring Reality fan over here to review my debate yesterday that I had with Tahir Nasser, who is an Ahmadi Muslim. I thought it went well. What are your guys' thoughts? AP, you were watching live, weren't you?
Yeah, I was watching I watched the whole thing except for like the Q&A section. The last 20 minutes or so I had to leave. Still wanted to watch those because I made a super chat in the end, and I'm not sure if James read it. I wanted him to read it.
No, he did. He read it.
Good. Okay, good. So my super chat was basically that I wish every debater was like Tahir and Mike, not clowns like Daniel Kikic and Apostate Prophet. That was pretty much my impression of the debate. I did watch it live. I made quite a few notes. I must say, I guess from my impression so far, so Tahir was a very, very respectful guy. And I guess Ahmadis are overall significantly more respectful than Sunni Muslims and other Muslims. The guy was also quite well read compared to regular Muslim believers and apologists, Sunni Muslims. He was a good debater, I would say, from what I see. So he was a good debater to be your opponent. You were, though, significantly better. And I'm not saying this to flatter you. Don't get arrogant or anything now. Okay?
I already am. I'm already there.
AP, he's not going to give you his intro music. Give it up. Okay?
That said, all the praises, that said, the arguments were, some of them were really, really bad on his part. He made some really bad misinterpretations and misquotations, especially when it came to things like saying that the Bible proves that whoever is crucified is a false prophet and things like that. He then corrected himself later on that. But citing the Ebionites, that was, in my opinion, was just a very low, like a very quick way to discredit yourself. And yeah, and also, of course, Ahmadi interpretations of certain hadiths and things like that, interpreting things metaphorically and all of that was a little bit loserly. But overall, it was a nice debate.
Yeah, he kind of got him at one point on that. My overall impression was he is very respectful, very nice. There is a running joke that the Ahmadis are the Mormons of Islam, even though it's not theologically in a good equivalent, but sociologically, I think you could say that they kind of are like that. But very nice, very respectful, just like Mormons are. Ahmadis are very nice, respectful. I mean, he was a very nice guy. It's a very hard position for him to defend, the swoon theory.
Yeah.
I thought he defended it as best as anyone could. The problem is that's just an indefensible theory. And just when you start looking at what medical experts say, who've written on the crucifixion, when you just look at all the early sources. And a good example is when he was going to Isaiah 53. Like, I'm like, why are you bringing this up? Like, this is not even relevant. And then like in the Q&A, I went and checked at one point. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Isaiah 53 says that the suffering servant dies. He's slaughtered. He goes to the land of the dead. And so then his whole argument was, well, that's metaphorical language. And I'm like, well, hold on. Then I can just say when you're bringing up about the suffering servant having offspring, I can say that's metaphorical language. So it was a double standard when he did stuff like that, quite through and through. But Than, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I had to bounce after a little bit into his opening statement. I would agree with a lot of what AP just said. That he was really respectful and intelligent, and he seemed like he seemed like a guy that I would just love to actually talk to about this kind of stuff, rather than somebody that I'd want to bash my face against the wall listening to. So I love that part. I had to drop out after pretty much the part of his argument where he said that Christians engage in circular reasoning from the resurrection to the divinity of Christ. And so I think there was a lot of bad arguments, and I think there was bad use of data in his argumentation. And my overall impression, just from what I did see, is that you came out on top. And again, I'm not saying that to flatter you either, but I think overall, I want that debate for Muslims at least to see his character and demeanor in that debate and see if they can't replicate that. Because that's the kind of discourse I would love to have with Muslims, and that's hard to find.
Oh, AP knows all about that. AP and David here, they know all about discourse with Muslims. Yeah, Ahmadis are definitely above and beyond in terms of, compared to Sunnis, for example, in terms of how much more respectful and nice they are. There's no comparison there. But yeah, I thought it was a good debate. There was a lot of issues with what he said. It seems like he didn't want to actually debate the topic for the most part. I felt like a lot of times we're debating theology or the resurrection, or like, did James and Paul agree, or the nature of prophecy. And I'm like, what are we even doing? Like, we're not even talking about the main topic here. It was very odd to see that constantly happening, where I was constantly having to be like, this is irrelevant to whether or not Jesus died. I could agree with you that Jesus never claimed to be God, and he would still have died on the cross. Like, this doesn't actually support your point, but he went on for a while about that kind of stuff.
There is also a misunderstanding on his behalf, which I think wasn't really caught because people are generally not familiar with how Muslims misunderstand biblical teachings and beliefs. But for example, when you were talking about the sign of Jonah, for example, he kept saying something that is that when Jonah is swallowed and he survives, this needs to be a sign so that people can see it, because it has to serve to show to people that God exists. He said that, and he mentioned a similar concept somewhere else. He is kind of reading into the whole biblical narrative, this Islamic idea that everything is just done to prove that Allah is real and that there is only Allah and nothing else. And this is not a struggle that is at the core, or even part of the big narrative of the Bible. This is an Islamic understanding. The Bible doesn't present these miraculous things to prove to people that it is God. God exists. That's not what the Bible is going for. But he made it look like that is what it is, and that might be a misunderstanding which stems from his Islamic perspective.
I was going to ask about that, because that was one of the things that I got out of this, but I didn't know if I was reading into the situation. Does it seem it might? So correct me if I'm wrong, AP, but it seems like you're in agreement if I said something like he took a lot of Islamic or Muslim understandings of the Bible and how to understand it, and just inserted that into the conversation rather than arguing for those assumptions and presuppositions.
Yes.
Okay.
Precisely.
Yeah, David, you got a lot of experience with the Ahmadi Muslims, for example. But do they do that often?
Yeah, most of my early interactions. So I had a friend before Nabil who was a Muslim, and he was just a regular Sunni Muslim. And then when I started getting into discussions with Nabil, for basically the next 4 years, most of my interactions with Muslims were with the Ahmadi version of Islam, which they were still trying to prove to me that Muhammad is a prophet, the Quran's word of God. Pretty standard apologetics with that stuff. It was scientific miracles, sometimes perfect preservation, things like that. But when you got to Jesus, it was the Ahmadi version where he, of course, survives. He's crucified, but he survives the crucifixion and later goes to India and so on. So, I was dealing that for a while, but yeah, the Ahmadi, I find this interesting because yes, Ahmadis historically significantly nicer than like let's say Salafis. But I mean, their motto that I always heard from them was "love for all, hatred for none." But I think that has to change. Same thing with Ismaili Muslims. I've noticed a change in the behavior of some of the Ahmadis and some of the Ismailis, that they become much more aggressive, and I think it's just sort of needing to survive in an atmosphere where the new Dawa is this aggressive, in your face, shouting down, we're strong than you, haha, me strong, you weak, haha, and doing that. And I think other Muslim groups are are realizing, wait a minute, these are the guys who are exploding in popularity. Why? Well, they're the guys saying we're strong and everyone else is weak, and we have to be more like that. And so I think you're going to see. I'm already seeing a shift, like the way Ahmadis are even like responding to me. So I'm getting, what was it, yesterday or something? But now it's the Ahmadi group made a video about me, and then but the tweet is, David Wood can't get away with his lies this time. We are on the case. We respond to his deceit about the Quran in this new series, right? And then the thumbnail is David Wood caught lying, and it's going to be. I haven't watched it yet. I'll probably watch it live in a live stream at some point. But it's more of the chest thumping, and we're strong and everyone else is weak now. So yeah,
I recently saw a video of Ahmadis in response to my whole my objections to, or my video on how Islam completely misunderstands Jesus, and it was the most respectful video I've seen coming from Muslims. Honestly, it was like, we want to respond to the dear apostate prophet Ridwan, and we would just like for him to listen to this and consider our approach and our refutations. And it was like, wow, I've never heard something like this from any Muslim before. Wow. There's one part in the debate, IB, that I feel like I really got stuck on that, and you might not have considered it too important to stay on that topic, but to me, it's a detail that I just can't get over when it's also repeated several times, and I even texted you about it later. The Son of Man.
The Son of Man
reference.
thing, yeah.
Yeah. He kept making it look like Son of Man means son of male human as we understand it today, and since Jesus didn't have a father in the traditional sense, that means he can't be Son of Man. And I just thought to myself, wait, is he actually saying what I think he's saying right now? And he confirmed that he's actually saying that. But the phrase Son of Man, it doesn't mean literally that you are the son of a man as we understand it today. It just means human, basically, because man refers to human, and was the word used generally in a traditional sense, as opposed to what we understand today when we say man, which is a male human. So his old assertion that Son of Man proves that he was not a virgin, or that he was not born of a virgin, is kind of a weird statement to make, and just looks like a little bit strange coming from a guy who is quite well read. It looks like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, what he was trying to do, and I think it was a little bit more complex than that. He was trying to say, well, you believe that Jesus is born of a virgin, but you call him the Son of Man. He can't be that. You don't want to take that literally, but you will take literally the expression Son of God. And I call him out on that. I'm like, no, the consensus of scholars is that when Jesus says he's the Son of God, it means he is the Messiah. Like, we have coins from the Simon Bar Kokhba rebellion where he's called like the Son of God as well, or some variation of that. Like, that's just another messianic title. So like, I don't have to use the title Son of God to argue for Trinitarianism. I used other verses that he wasn't prepared to go on. And it just seems like he was really unprepared for a lot of things. Like, at one point, I pointed out how in the Gospel of Luke, you have Jesus saying only worship God. And then the only other time that Greek word shows up in Luke is when the disciples worship Jesus at the end of the Gospel of Luke. And he was like, well, everyone knows that was added later. And I thought about it after, and I think he got confused. I think he was referring to either the Gospel of Mark or John, because some scholars think John 21 was added later. And the consensus is that the long ending of Mark is a later addition that even I would agree with. Not for John, but for Mark. So I think he got confused. I think he thought I was either talking about the Gospel of Mark and John. So it just seemed like he was very unfamiliar with the biblical text. And I'll give another example here in a minute, but that's what I thought.
No, that's correct. As soon as he mentioned that, and he even treated it as if this was this was very well known, and everyone knows that this is considered a later edition. So I'm very surprised that you don't know. This is kind of the approach that he took when he brought that up. But I mean, that was confusing to me and to a lot of other people. There is no such consensus. He's probably confusing something there. And I don't know. I don't remember if you actually, insisted on correcting him on that.
I did.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
I was like, no. There's never been a manuscript. Even P75, for example, one of the earliest copies of Luke has that ending. So
I wonder
him to say
if he would
that,
correct himself on that. I don't know.
Yeah, he needs to correct himself on that, because that was a pretty big blunder. I mean, he had a couple of those. Let me, I want to put this on the screen because, again, this was the one debate where I felt like he was constantly trying to avoid the main topic, unfortunately. Like we were talking about everything but the crucifixion. But he brings up, David will know this, Acts 21 to try to show that Paul and James are disputing. And that's not what's going on in here. If you read this, like Paul comes to Jerusalem, and then James comes to him and says, you see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed. They are zealous for the law. And they have been told about you that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them to not circumcise their children and to walk according to their customs. What then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. Do therefore what we tell you. Okay, we have 4 men under a vow. Take these men and purify yourself along with and pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads. Thus all will know that there is nothing in what they have been told about you, but that you yourself also live in observance of the law. But as for the Gentiles who have believed, we have sent a letter with our judgment that they should abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols, and from blood, what has been strangled, and from sexual immorality. The very same conclusion at the council in Acts 15, that Gentiles don't have to become Jews. James is not contradicting Paul here. He's agreeing with Paul, and he's wants to get rid of this rumor that Paul is erroneously telling Jews among the Gentiles to forsake Moses. Paul's not doing that in Galatians. He's not doing that in Romans. He's telling Gentiles they don't have to become Jews, but he's not telling Jews they have to become Gentiles. So this has been used by Paul Williams and other Muslims, and Tahir used it last night, this argument that there's a big debate going on between James and Paul is allegedly repenting of something. It just isn't true at all. So this is just him taking a passage just clearly out of context. This is being written, of course, I would argue it's being written by Luke, who's a companion of Paul. So it'd be very unlikely he's going to even represent James this way as somehow disagreeing with Paul. But like this is a common thing I'll see, is that they'll just take Acts 21 out of context to try to show there was this divide between James and Paul, so they can try to make the case that maybe James was more like their theology.
No, as you pointed out, they're saying this passage lines up perfectly with it. It's, hey, this is what people are saying you're doing with Jews. Now, we've already written to the Gentiles that this is as much as of the law as they need to be worried about. But notice, Gentiles needing to be circumcised is not on their list of things that the Gentiles have to do, which is exactly what Paul is saying in Galatians. It's, you guys do not have to convert to Judaism first and then become Christians. So yeah, I don't know.
Then
seems dumb to
well, then he tried to go to 1 Corinthians 9 to say that Paul was saying he was not under the law, but he ignores the very next verse. To those outside of the law, I became as one outside of the law, not being outside of the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside of the law. So what is Paul saying in verse 20? Well, I mean, scholars like, for example, what's the name of this book here? The book is, Remain in Your Calling by Brian J. Tucker and another guy. But what they point out in this is that Paul often uses those under the law to designate those living under like a Pharisaic interpretation or some sort of strict law of the elder interpretation. So this is what I was trying to note in the debate, is that you're taking this out of context. Paul's not saying he's not under the Jewish law, that is the law of Moses. He's referring to those that are like under this Pharisaic mindset, this Pharisaic law, because in the very next verse, he says he's under the law of God.
Pretty solid.
Pretty solid. All right, let's go through some super chats. Then I want to bring up some clips from the debate here. Thank you for becoming a YouTube member there. Appreciate that. Meta Awakening. The Mormons of Islam minus the magic underwear. yeah. I don't think Ahmadis have magic underwear, unfortunately.
No, unfortunately. Yeah.
You don't know what they wear.
You guys, thoughts? If Shroud of Turin is proven to be Yeshua's burial cloth, would you add it to your argument for his death and resurrection? Well, I think so. I probably would. I'm not convinced of that, actually. I've gone back and forth over the years, and I'm
wait. What do you mean? Not convinced that it's authentic, or not convinced that if it's authentic, it would apply to the death and resurrection?
I'm not convinced it's authentic. I think it might have been a shroud that.
Based.
Yeah, I think it might actually been a shroud the Crusaders picked up in like the Byzantine Empire, because in the Byzantine churches and in Orthodox churches today, they always have shrouds like present. So I think that's kind of what happened with this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my view is if you listen to like a positive case for the evidence for the shroud being authentic, sounds pretty convincing, but I don't know. I've seen some responses to those claims, so yeah, I'd say the jury's out. If it's, put it this way, if it's authentic, pretty much like you have a photograph of the resurrection, which would be I don't know if that's not going to do it. I don't know what would, yeah. So if it's authentic, then you got a photo of the resurrection. If it's not, then it's pretty interesting, whatever it is. And some people think that it was made for like a play or something like this, and then something happened to it along the way that gave it some interesting features and so on, or that it was an actual burial cloth of some crucifixion victim, but we don't know who, and so on. So anyway, there are other possibilities. I'd have to see a bit more.
You just don't want to believe. That's it.
Yeah. Like, I don't believe in burial.
Sandy, what is your opinion on the shroud?
I'm kind of withholding judgment on it for now. I lean towards it's not authentic right now based off what I've looked at. But I also just haven't looked at the positive case, like the scholarly side of the positive case yet. So I lean not authentic, but withholding judgment publicly, if that makes sense.
One of the guys I quote in the debate is Frederick Zugby, who's an actual medical doctor. He is convinced the shroud is authentic. I didn't actually read that part of the book where he makes that case. Maybe he makes a good case. It's just something I've not looked too much into.
Oh, but by the way, little side note. Some people are probably familiar with this because I think Nabil talks about it in Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. But I was there. But Nabil, I had asked Nabil when I first started talking to Nabil. I get to the point where I ask him, hey, if you're wrong about what you just said, do you want to know it, and so on? And then we go into it a little bit. And at first it was science and history and logic and mathematics and everything. All of this proves that Islam is true. And so we get into some discussions for a little while. And then eventually, and I remember we're in the meeting room where we had the speech and debate team meeting. And I said, hey, what would make you actually start doubting if this stuff is true? Because I noticed he had a lot of confidence in Islam. So what would cause you to doubt that? And he said, well, I have to admit a lot of my confidence in Islam is because I respect my dad, and he just is so much more knowledgeable about all this stuff. And so a lot of confidence is just seeing how my dad interacts with this stuff. So he said, if I ever saw my dad backed into a corner, then, then that would make me think, oh, okay, maybe it's not as strong as I think. And so anyway, and then Mike Lacona, who lived in the same area, he told me Gary Habermas was coming down to discuss. They would meet out after every like Labor Day weekend. And anyway, I said, so Mike had Gary Habermas coming over his house. And so I told Nabil, hey, you should bring your dad over, and then we can have a discussion about the Jesus death and resurrection. which his dad did. And originally it was supposed to be his Nabil's dad and some other important Ahmadi figure versus Mike and Gary. See, if I knew then what I knew now, I would have brought something to record it, because this, funny. But and then the other guy couldn't make it. It ended up being that he couldn't make it. But so Nabil took that place, and it was Nabil was actually in the discussion. But Gary and Mike the entire time are just listening to them, and I'm going, would you guys please pounce on this stuff? I know it's nonsense, and I know you guys know it's nonsense. But they kept just going, that's an interesting view. Yeah, that is. I think you're a little wrong. And I go, no, that's not going to work. And eventually Nabil and his dad both started defending the Shroud of Turin and saying that it proves that the whoever it was survived crucifixion. They're like, because the blood, this proves that the person's heart was still beating and he was alive and so on. And Gary goes, wait. He said to Nabil's dad, he goes, wait, you're saying that you believe the Shroud of Turin is the authentic burial cloth of Jesus? And Nabil's dad goes, yeah. And Gary turns to Nabil and says, you agree with that? And Nabil goes, yeah. And he goes, and all of a sudden Gary like super perked up, and he goes, well, you got a problem, because I've written 3 books on that, and let me tell you. And then it was just Gary, I don't know what set Gary off, because they were talking about the death and resurrection the entire time. As soon as they granted Shroud of Turin, it was just completely shifted. But so I think it's fairly common among Ahmadis. I don't know which of their guys argued it. Fairly common among Ahmadis to believe that the Shroud of Turin is authentic, and they think it supports their case when, it doesn't. But anyway, so the point is, if we're talking to an atheist and we're trying to argue from the Shroud of Turin, we'd have to show that it's authentic. If we got people who are saying, hey, the Shroud of Turin is authentic, and we'll, okay, all right, let's talk about that then.
Yeah, I'm not even convinced it is, but yeah. Does Apologeticon happen every year? Same venue, can't get time of, or else I'd love to be there working on a crochet farfor for the Dizzle and AP. Need to know how to get them to y'all. I mean, so it's going to be at Chip Bennett's church in Sarasota, Florida. If you just go to the Apologeticon website, you'll see all the info there, and you can show up. I think from what I heard from Chip is that he wants it to be every year. So yeah, I think it should be every year. We're just going to see. I think they're going to see how this one goes, and then we will.
That's usually a rule. See how something goes, and then decide whether to continue it.
Yeah. IP, please do a debate on the validity of the rapture theory. Thank you for the very, very generous super chat. Yeah, I'd love to debate someone on the rapture. That would be fun to do, because that's just, give me like an easy one to knock out of the park. Rapture's not in the Bible. Boom. And easy. Can make one for IP too if you like. Oh, that's the the farfor crochet. Sure. Well, if you got to come to Apologeticons to give it to us if you want to do that. IP, you said the Torah should be understood as judicial wisdom. Does that apply to Leviticus? Because Leviticus seems to be literal. Yeah, so you have to understand in the cultural context, they would write in that way. And the way things have often been translated, it often gets muddy. No one would look at like the Torah and be like, yes, we found an adulterer, let's stone him. That honestly would not have happened in that culture. For the same reason they wouldn't look at the Code of Hammurabi or the Code of Lipit Ishtar and be like, yeah, these are the laws of the land. These are the laws of Hammurabi. This was judicial wisdom for its time. Just because it may look literal to you, that doesn't mean that's how the culture understood it. You got to look at the Torah the same way you look at Proverbs. It's not teaching you how to deal with fools. When it says, answer a fool in his folly, he shall be, if you answer a fool in his folly, you'll become like him. If you leave a fool in his folly, he'll think he's right in his own ways. It's not giving you instructions on how to deal with a fool. It's teaching you what a fool is like. Likewise, the Torah is trying to teach you what wisdom is like. Muslims often look at the Torah as if this is like legislation, like in the Quran. It's not. It's not like legislation in the Quran. It's more akin to judicial wisdom. It's showing you what a justice could look like in an ideal system, what it could look like to the surrounding nations. But that's not how you would actually carry out justice. And a good example is when David sleeps with Bathsheba. They don't show up and stone him to death for being an adulterer. He gets a different punishment. So that's not how they would look at it in that ancient context.
I think you can always, in order to understand why Muslims have such a different view from the of the Torah and of different scripture in general, and what they are actually trying to do when they present that view, you have to always understand and keep in mind how Muslims view the Quran, and Muslims also think this is the way Allah reveals the Quran. The other scriptures should also be in nature the very quite similar or the same thing. And Muslims view the Quran as just a verbatim revelation from Allah, or a direct revelation from Allah, where every single word is directly from Allah for all humankind, and every single word is unchangeable, direct law. Of course, there are some discussions on interpreting those words, but everything that you find in there is very much a direct command to everybody at all times. And Muslims will, from that standpoint, judge the Torah, the Gospels, the other books of the New Testament, and even the Talmud, as we have recently, for example, seen, in the same way. They will treat those books entirely, all together, quite the same way, and say and act like every single word in those is a revelation or a command. Every single thing that is mentioned in there is law, and it's always useful to keep that in mind when arguing with Muslims, to understand what they're going for.
I gotta put this one up one time. Sus AP says IP's goatee is looking cute. Thanks. Now I feel creeped out.
Well, you should.
I love that profile picture.
Yeah, I was worried about this. I was worried about this IP because it happens to me. AP comes on the show and one of his followers follows you over, and then you have to deal with this perverted stuff instead of our normal wholesome Christian stuff.
Yeah, I think somebody took that screenshot from yesterday's live stream, and then.
Dude, it looks like what you're wearing now. It looks like you took that screenshot now. Did you not change your clothes yesterday?
No, I did. I even shaved, so this is different.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
There are a few things that I want to talk about in the debate. I'm not sure if you're going to get to those. I made notes on three things, which are Ebionites, the virgin birth, and Tahir's whole misunderstanding of the death of Jesus on the cross. How he thinks it somehow means that the divinity or that the divine died and ceased existing for a while. And
yeah, so that happened towards the end of the debate. Let's talk about that, because he's going on. He actually said this is the thing he would say to Jesus if he died and Jesus was standing before him and said that he was God. It's like Tahir said he will say to Jesus, I didn't believe in you because you died in Christianity, but you said in the Old Testament God does not die. And it's like, I'm sitting here trying to wrap my brain about going, what verse is he referring to? So I just asked him, what verse are you referring to? And his first verse was, oh, it's in 1 Timothy 6. I was like, that's in the New Testament. What are you going on about? So then he tried Psalm 92, where it says God is everlasting to everlasting. And I'm like, that also does not say God cannot become human and die. Like, so
the thing is,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the problem with him is that he doesn't even, his argument there, it seems, as he revealed when he went on with that argument, his argument is not even that God cannot become a human and die in that state. It is that God died that day and God simply cannot die. So he kind of he dismisses or doesn't understand or doesn't take into consideration any of the complex or basic Christology that took place, or the hypostatic union. He doesn't consider any of these things. To him, it is just Jesus, literally as he was, is a divine being. He is a divine figure, and when he comes here and pain is inflicted and he dies, that means God died, and that just doesn't make sense because God cannot die. So it's like it's it's a misunderstanding of basic Christology, and it's very confusing that he would bring that up.
Yeah, let's play the clip here. So this was me pressing him on where the Old Testament says that God can die.
Same Psalm 92, 90, and then colon 2. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Right? From everlasting to everlasting.
Look
what
at
that
Mike's
means
face.
is you can't have an intermission in everlasting where you don't exist anymore because you're dead.
Look at Mike's face.
Okay,
Well, then we're
Isaiah,
equivocating on the word dead, because Jesus didn't cease to exist when he died. His body just died.
right. Again, so this is again more kind of wordplay, I would say, where
Yeah.
This, look, here,
it's
pause,
wordplay. It's
pause,
basically,
pause,
it's
pause,
something
pause.
that Paul
Hold on.
did, and actually
All right.
Paul pioneered
Sorry, I
this
was on the
kind
wrong
of.
tab. There you go.
Is there a
pause.
zoom feature? I just somebody click,
Look at
take
now,
a snapshot
look at
of Mike's face here.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? It's wordplay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What are you talking about? Of course, you're going to make a distinction here in the wording because it refers to completely different things. It's not like we're discussing semantics here, and it's just you're just talking about the word, or it's the same thing. No, it's not the same thing. We are talking about quite different things. This has nothing to do with the wordplay. The divinity, the divine figure dying, and the human body dying for a certain purpose are different things, and you have to understand or learn and distinguish between these things. But it seems like he either can't distinguish or he chooses not to distinguish here, and that's very confusing.
Well, the most confusing part is how if this were flipped back on him, I mean, what do you even do with the Quran? So Ahmadis, they believe that Jesus was nailed to a cross, but that he wasn't crucified, because they'll say, well, crucified means killed by crucifixion. And since Jesus didn't actually die by crucifixion, then he wasn't crucified. And so they can affirm the Quran verse that says that he wasn't killed nor crucified. And they'll say what that means is he didn't die by crucifixion, but he was actually nailed to a cross. Whereas in the Bible, when they nailed Jesus to a cross, it said they crucified him. He was still alive on the cross. It says they crucified him. So notice that would be two different meanings of the word crucified, right? One is to nail to a cross. Even if you survive, you've been crucified. The other is you've actually been executed by crucifixion. And they, in order for their argument to work, have to go with different meanings for that word. But that's not it. If you go to the Quran, Surah 3, verse 169, it says, think not of those who are killed in the way of Allah as dead. Nay, they are alive with their Lord and they have their provision. So it's saying, hey, your buddy just died in battle. Don't think of him as dead. He's alive. So wait a minute. What do you mean? If he's dead,
Exactly.
if he's dead, how is he alive? His body may have been killed, but he's alive with Allah. You see that? That's interesting. And then
Exactly.
And then of course you have Surah 8, verse 17. Talking about after the Battle of Badr, Muslims won the Battle of Badr, and then they were bragging about the people they've killed. And then Allah replies to them. He said, you killed them not, but Allah killed them. And Muhammad had thrown dust in the battle to insult the kuffar. And it says, and you, Muhammad, threw not when you threw, but Allah threw. So here you're saying, hey, I killed them. And Allah says, you didn't kill them. You didn't kill them. I killed them. And so you can't even say, I killed those guys. It's like, wait a minute, I jammed a sword into the guy. And Allah's saying, aha, yeah, but you were a mere instrument for me. And so it's using these terms like die and crucify and kill in multiple senses. And you have to use it in multiple senses, or it just doesn't make any sense at all. And suddenly you go to the Bible and nope, it says this about God. And this is the only possible sense to use any of the, I don't know. It's weird stuff, man. It's weird.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is he said it's wordplay, and I'm like, and I said yes, exactly, because that's what you're doing. You're saying the Old Testament says God doesn't die, and you go to a place where it says God is eternal. Okay, yeah, that's not what it says. This is wordplay. Like, thanks for proving my point.
That's funny. He's doing exactly what. Yeah, you're correct. That's exactly what's happening here.
Let me find, where is that Ebionite clip? Oh yeah, 201:29. So let's go to there, because this is, oh my god, every time they bring up the Ebionites, it's like, really, we're doing this again?
It sounds like they don't understand what the Ebionites are. Yeah.
All right, let's play this and then let's go through this.
Listen to him. Paul, in actual fact, and I refer you to the book Paul and the Pharisee Conspiracy Against Jesus.
I'm pretty sure, first of all, that book, Paul and the Conspiracy of Jesus, I'm pretty sure that's a book that was written by his father. Like, I remember looking it up. I think that's because his father wrote a book on Paul, and I'm pretty sure that's that book. So he's basically saying, yeah, well, my dad said so.
In actual fact, was a hypocrite within Jesus's movement who sought to distort Jesus's actual message so as to make it unpalatable for Jews to accept by making out like Jesus was in actual fact an idolatrous figure within Christianity, when in actual fact Jesus was the leader of the Ebionites, the early Jewish Christian movement. So as for the medical research, I'll finish on this particular point.
The Ebionites. Here we go again.
Really, is his father's name Said?
Yeah.
Yeah, then his dad wrote it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah.
This is like he didn't even go very much into what the Ebionites are. He just briefly mentioned them, and the thing is just I don't know, when a Muslim mentions the Ebionites here as a supporting argument for their viewpoint on how Christianity is corrupted and the early Christians were not like that and all of that, it's just I don't know, like the BS radar goes up. And it just looks like, yeah, that's you are making a terrible point right now. You have just discredited yourself. There is no evidence that it's not even argued that the Ebionites were the early Christians or the first Christians, and that later Christianity became corrupted. It is a movement that emerges at some point later on. Plus, the ideas of the Ebionites are not the way that Muslims make them out to be. The Ebionites, apparently, according to all of the reports, rejected the virgin birth. They rejected the virgin birth and considered it heretical, because the virgin birth implies that Jesus was from the beginning not human, that he was from the beginning, that there was a divine nature to him, a superhuman nature to him. And the Ebionites reject that because the Ebionites have an adoptionist Christology, where they believe that he was born merely as a human, but then later chosen and adopted by God as the Messiah or the Son of God, which is why they would, for example, reject the virgin birth entirely and say this is a heretical view that we cannot possibly accept. Accepting that is blasphemy to us. According to all the sources we have on the Ebionites, this is what they believed. How can you reconcile that with the Islamic view, where even where the virgin birth is used as the primary, miracle of Allah's power to prove that this is a prophet, which doesn't even make sense on its own. But this is only one point. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I just looked up the description of that book from his dad. It says this work, and by the way, I've heard this before from Muslims, but you'll find lots of Muslims thinking something about Paul being part of some conspiracy and so on, but these guys actually dial it up that it's a conspiracy of the Pharisees and so on. But anyway, it says this work sets forth powerful evidence that St. Paul, whose writings form the basis of all fundamental Christian doctrines, was a Pharisee agent working secretly to pervert Jesus' true teachings. His goal, to substantiate the false allegation that Jesus and his followers were apostates from Judaism. This work covers how Paul's supporters nurtured the Pharisee conspiracy for generations, building the foundation of the church and Christianity. So again, I've encountered that before. But so guys, think about this. Here's the view. It's that you've got Judaism and you've got Jesus, and then Jesus has some enemies among the Pharisees. And so the Pharisees send in their agent, Paul, to corrupt the teachings of Jesus and turn it into this completely corrupt system so that anyone who joins it will be an apostate. And that's how they're protecting Judaism. And it's like, so wait a minute, Paul is actually devout Pharisee, and in order to lead people off the trail of Jesus, who's just telling people to believe in God and believe in the Torah, in order to throw people off of that, he starts Christianity. Like he starts Christianity. They're saying he started a deliberate heresy to throw people off the trail of Jesus. For what? Like what's the purpose of getting people away from Jesus? Because the Pharisees thought Jesus would corrupt Judaism. So they invent Christianity. That's your theory.
Oops,
it's wild. That
backfired. Backfired really bad.
Yeah, and so it's just extreme. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And if you wanted to go that route, and just start saying, I think it's a conspiracy for people who want to corrupt the true teachings. I mean, how easy would it be to say that about Mirza Ghulam Ahmed? He wanted to destroy Islam from within. So what he did was he started this heretical movement to get people away from that. And that would lead to other heretical movements, and all these heretical movements would destroy Islam. And then we would get all these Dawah guys, and they'd all be preaching. And then, the Ahmadis, even today, they're all in on this conspiracy to destroy Islam from within. For some reason, they wouldn't be at all impressed by that sort of reasoning. But when they go to Christianity, that's how they approach it. Why? Because they have to. You need to. Other Muslims have the exact same problem, in that Muhammad said what Jesus was like and what his followers were like, and they're all devout Muslims. And so, that makes sense. If you're in 7th century Arabia and someone tells you this, you don't know anything about Christianity. You don't know what the evidence is going to show, but your prophet is telling you this is what the case was. Then you eventually investigate, and oops, none of this lines up with Islam at all. None of this, not Jesus, not his followers. Something's going wrong. Something's going very, very wrong here. And so what do you need? You need to explain why none of the evidence lines up with what you're saying. So who do you blame for this? And you can have Muslims who don't know anything about anything, and they'll say the Council of Nicaea, the Council of Nicaea. It's like, wait, we know what the 1st century church was teaching. This isn't something that came in the 4th century, the Council of Nicaea. This is 1st century. So what do you need in order to get Islam to work? You need someone in the 1st century who wasn't Jesus and wasn't one of his original disciples, because they were all devout Muslims, and yet was also powerful enough to corrupt all of Christianity. And what do they come up with? Paul is the only person they can come up with to blame. And so they have to put all of this on the Apostle Paul. He's the one who did it all, amazingly. And how do you do that? By some sort of conspiracy theory.
It was the Jews.
Yeah, but just notice, so you got the Jews, you got the followers of Jesus. So you've got the Jews, you've got the followers of Jesus, who were not Christians until Paul corrupted Christianity. So Jews, followers of Jesus. And so there's a conflict between the Jews and the followers of Jesus over what we have no idea, because all the teachings that we would consider heretical from an Islamic perspective came from Paul. So for some reason, these guys are at odds. And Paul goes right into the middle of this and starts spouting stuff that is not Judaism and is not the teachings of Jesus. It's just complete heretical nonsense that doesn't agree with either side. He's trying to destroy it. The question would then become, wait a minute, if Paul isn't agreeing with the Jews and he's not agreeing with the followers of Jesus, he's preaching some completely new stuff. How does he convince people to follow him? No, in other words, anyone you went up to was going to say this guy's wrong. If you went up to a Jew and you said, "Hey, is Paul's teaching that Jesus is the divine Son of God? Is that Judaism?" They go, "No, you can't trust that guy." And according to the Ahmadis here, if you went to Jesus followers, they would have all hated Paul too. They would all say, "No, he's making all this stuff up." So their view is that one guy who would have had support from literally no one on the planet, as far as agreeing with his views, that guy managed to change everything and
exactly
completely overpower Allah himself.
David, this is very ironic. I'm not sure if you're aware or if you just made that up as a hypothetical to make a comparison, but the Ahmadis, it is actually a common accusation among Muslims that Mirza Ghulam Ahmed and the Ahmadis were spies for the British Empire or something like that to corrupt Islam. So it is indeed, actually, if you go on certain Ahmadi websites, you will find that it is such a conspiracy that bothers them. They actually have responses to that. So I just looked it up. Even the very same the website of the very same guy who discussed or who debated Mike has an article on, was Mirza Ghulam Ahmed a British spy?
Oh, so you could actually make the case. He's like, listening, you can just dismiss someone's claims with a little conspiracy theory here and say he's working for someone else. Well, I have to reject it, but yeah.
That was the whole debate. I would just be like, hey, the Bible says Jesus died. It says in John 19, he's dead on the cross. And he just kept reinterpreting that like into metaphorical language. He's like, well, no, it means the place of the dead. Jesus says in Matthew 16, Matthew 17, they will kill me. That's not saying what you think it says. So it's like, is this like Princess Bride thing? He was only mostly dead. That's what they meant. It's like, it's ridiculous.
That seems to contradict his point from earlier, even though, right? Because he even said, like, well, God cannot die, but then wants to say that he's in the place of the dead. But you were playing word games when you said that, right?
Make no.
Nice.
I got this
very
short video here on the Ebionites. It's a minute long, and it's just like I'll play this really quickly here.
Watch this.
All right, if you insist.
These people who followed the teachings of Jesus, and none of them contradicts what the Quran says.
Ebionites. Ebionites.
Who are they?
They're a group of
Did they believe Jesus was crucified?
No.
No?
So that is demonstrably false from the text we have regarding the Ebionites. Eusebius tells us they celebrated the resurrection on Sunday, and Irenaeus implies that they believe Jesus died and rose again. There are simply no texts that say the Ebionites denied the crucifixion. The Ebionites also contradicted the teachings of Islam in other ways. They did not believe Jesus was the Christ. They believed the Christ was a heavenly figure who descended upon Jesus at his baptism, but departed from him at his crucifixion. Hippolytus of Rome also tells us the Ebionites believed they themselves could become Christ if they kept the requirements of the Jewish law. And many of the Ebionites appear to have denied the virgin birth, believing that Joseph was his biological father. Simply put, the Ebionites were not early Muslim.
Very, very nice.
There you go.
Well, what's also funny is
So
that
you have it.
Ebionites, the whole name Ebionites refers to poverty, right? Because they were considered a movement or a cult or a heretical sect or something that that says that Jesus mainly came here to teach people to repent and to let go of all kinds of worldly, attachments and belongings. They were considered this Gnostic almost movement who thought the worldly stuff is corrupt and we should let go of it and live basically in poverty with nothing, which doesn't really align with the way Islam sees things at all.
Yeah, they got to find some group in the first century to say they were Muslims, and the Ebionites are going to be the closest thing, because they did not think Jesus was God. He was just purely human. So they need that. The problem is when you look at the Ebionites, they just, when they get into the actual doctrines, they deny so much of what we see in Islam. So yeah, for him to bring them up and push this whole conspiracy nonsense while he has articles on his website debunking conspiracies about, Ahmed not being a spy, there was a lot of double standards I felt were happening in that debate. It's just like he gets to tell me when it's metaphorical language when it says Jesus rose from the dead. But when the Isaiah 53 says he will have offspring, that has to be absolutely literal. It can't mean anything else. It's a lot of double standards going on.
Oh yeah, and I mean, Muslim apologists from any background are kind of kings of this when they approach Christianity, because you have no choice. You can't put together a consistent methodology and go approach the text and get anything remotely resembling an Islamic conclusion from this stuff. So you have to, you just, what are you laughing at, AP?
I just found an article. I'm going to just send it to Michael in the private chat here.
Is this about conspiracies?
It is from I think it's from the website trueislam.co.uk.
Let me pull this one up here.
I didn't read it. I just Googled it and I found it.
I'm looking at it now.
Was Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmed a British agent? Written by Hassan Selby.
This is so funny, man.
Yes.
I didn't read it. I have no idea what it says, but it's very funny that this is one of the refutations you find on their very own website, and yet they can write books about how Christianity is basically a conspiracy by these powers to, I don't know, lead people away from the true teachings and all that.
And you could keep in mind, you could argue, once you are willing to just say, this person is involved in this big conspiracy, you could say Muhammad was in a big conspiracy because he really didn't like Arab paganism, but he didn't like Judaism either, and so he was this secret agent to go in there and keep. Think about this.
So that exists. That's Jack Chick. Jack Chick had that.
Oh yeah. I've seen that. But yeah, so think about this. If Muhammad believes that that the Arabs, the pagans of Arabia, are going to become Jews because they're being influenced by Jews now, what do? Well, start another religion that that will corrupt the Jewish teachings and so on, and even make them your primary enemies. And therefore, Muhammad was involved in this conspiracy. Could you go through the Muslim sources and put together a massive conspiracy on the part of Muhammad and find all kinds of evidence for it? Absolutely. If you want to say that Mirza Ghulam Ahmed is a British agent, can you go through things and say, you see here, look at this. This is proof. Of course you can. And your cases in either one of those situations would be significantly stronger. If you wanted to argue conspiracies, it'd be considerably stronger than anything you have to point to the Apostle Paul and say there was this big conspiracy going on. But you know, at the end of the day, what this leaves out, what these accusations leave out, is there are things that you look at in a person's life to find out if he's sincere or not. And one of the things you look at is this person willing to lay down his life and endure some really messed up stuff for what he's saying? If so, it doesn't sound like he's making it up. Sounds like he really, really believes in it. And the classic saying is, liars make poor martyrs. You can lie all you want. As soon as the blade's to your throat, you probably, don't keep up with the lie and defend your lie to the death. But, Paul gets repeatedly beaten and tortured and shipwrecked and eventually beheaded over his claims about Jesus, which, according to our Muslim friends of almost all varieties, is just, it's made up. And he's going to his bloody death, and his followers are going to their bloody deaths over something that's just made up because they don't like Jesus.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with it, and we have no evidence that the early Christians actually disagree with Paul. They didn't, like when James wrote his letter, his epistle. He's not like, you'd think if Paul was like ruining everything, that would be what the letter is about. He doesn't even bring up the issue. Like, we don't see this in First Peter. We don't see it in Jude. Like, when did the early church hate Paul so much? It's just, you got to say, well, that's all conspiracy as well. It's maybe the letters of Peter were also forged. Maybe all of the other writings all just came from this church and Paul. It's like, eventually you got to posit some pretty wacky conspiracy that just is just divorced from reality, that not even your liberal atheist scholars are going to go with. So it's, yeah, it's like in the debate. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to point out, and I pointed out earlier that his method of saying that, one word can only have one meaning unless I want it to have two meanings and so on, that and you can't apply this to words like death and so on and killed, completely contradicts the Quran, where Allah says, yeah, you didn't kill them, I did. No, wait, what are you talking about, Allah? I definitely killed them. I definitely killed them. I put my sword right through them. It's like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about who's ultimately responsible for it. I was using you as an instrument. So the Quran can do this, and Quran does this regularly, but somehow, no, you can't consider different meanings of of certain words and so on when you're going to Christianity. So there's that issue. In other words, his case, his claims, if he takes them seriously, would refute the Quran. But you have a similar issue here. Surah 61, verse 14. Allah says that he's going to aid the true followers of Jesus until they become uppermost. So, and he says he did that. He aided the true followers of Jesus until they became uppermost. You can go to like the Yusuf Ali Quran. It gives commentary, says this obviously applies to Christians taking over the Roman Empire. Mm-hmm. So wait, the Quran is saying that Allah is going to help the true followers of Jesus until they become uppermost over the people who reject Jesus. You ask Muslims, which group became uppermost over people who rejected Jesus? Because those are the ones who have Allah's stamp of approval. And I say, it's the followers of Jesus who took over the Roman Empire. IP, you study all this stuff, and you study history. Quick question about the Christians who took over the Roman Empire. Did they like Paul or view him as a guy who conspired to destroy the teachings of Jesus from within?
Oh, they loved Paul. Paul's
a
saint.
They loved Paul. Huh. Wait, a saint. So wait, the true followers of Jesus, because Allah says he helped the true followers of Jesus, and this refers to Christians taking over the Roman Empire. The true followers of Jesus who took over are the ones who took over the Roman Empire, not according to me, according to the Quran. And so what did those guys believe? Well, they believed in Paul. And Allah says those are the true followers of Jesus, the ones who believed in Paul. And so that's what I mean. It's like the reason you cannot come up with a coherent methodology or a coherent position in all of this is because there is none. When your prophet, Muhammad, affirms the inspiration, preservation, authority of our text and affirms Jesus and his followers as Muslim, when your text affirms all this stuff, and then we factor in all the evidence, and you have to try to figure out why the evidence doesn't line up with what you're saying, you just have to have a terrible methodology in order to try and fit this into your system. And so,
well, that's what he did. And when we got into the open discussion, I asked him, do you believe Jesus was walking around after the crucifixion? And he just said, I don't know. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I've seen you say in your videos, you thought Jesus walked to meet the disciples. Like you've used that type of language. And so I eventually was just pressed him. And I said, look, if Jesus had actual nails going through his feet, okay, you wouldn't be able to walk for a month. When they have done reenactments in the Philippines, those guys that get nailed, they can't walk around for a month after if you get nails in your feet. So then his whole response was, well, maybe Jesus wasn't nailed. Maybe only his hands were nailed. I'm like, and then he used that as an argument that Jesus survived because he was able to walk around. And I was like, this is circular reasoning here. You're just saying, well, because he was walking around, he didn't get nails in his feet, and that shows he survived, so he was able to walk around. It's like, what? Like that's there. Everyone knows, like the in that culture, as the archaeological evidence shows, when you got crucified, nails went into your hands and feet. That's what the burial box of Yohanan shows. But he said, well, that must have not been for Jesus because he was walking around. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is pure circular reasoning here. Oh, all right. Let me give you a couple
also
more
the ridiculousness of the claim is also that Jesus actually, after the whole process of brutal crucifixion, Jesus survived this brutal crucifixion and had no problems appearing a few days later. It's like everything's all right, everything's good. I'm now going to travel across the world all the way to India and preach there to people, and nobody made any note of that. It's like, okay, yeah, sure.
Total sense. All right. Thank you for the super chat. Do we live under the Mosaic law or Christ law? If we do, how can we prove with scripture? So I would say we live under the law of Christ. The Mosaic law was fulfilled in Christ. So you can go to places like John 19, where Jesus says, I thirst to fulfill the scriptures. And then he said, it is finished. Hebrews chapter 7, Hebrews chapter 8, very good for that as well. So check out Hebrews, very good book on that. Thank you for the super chat. Cybotic IP did a great job yesterday. Much appreciated. Howdy, y'all. Do you think Mark and John don't believe in the virgin birth, or only the crucifixion and resurrection was enough to believe as Jesus as Messiah? So they never did. We can't argue from silence. They just didn't bring it up because it wasn't really relevant necessarily. But believing Jesus as Messiah, I think the virgin birth is a core doctrine. And actually, AP actually has a good video on this where he's debunking the whole what I think Islam gets wrong about Christianity, or it's what is the title of that video page? So like where Islam doesn't make sense, and you brought up the virgin birth. The virgin birth in Christianity is there because Jesus is shown to be from God directly, but in Islam it doesn't need to be there. What you did a video on that?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the video that is called "How Islam Got Jesus Completely Wrong."
Yeah, that's a good video on that. Yeah, but yeah, and then that video, AP points out that in Christianity, the reason why we accept the virgin birth, it's because Jesus was divine. It supports his divinity, and so yeah, I would say check out. I would say it's definitely a core doctrine. I don't know, Than, if you agree with that or not.
No, I would agree with that, and I have a video defending the virgin birth as well, talking about why an argument from silence on Mark and Paul's behalf isn't a good one. If for the people that are familiar with my types of videos, I go into some really boring Bayesian probability stuff about it.
What's your channel called again? It's
Exploring Reality.
Exploring Reality. Yeah, I subscribed to it earlier. I'll probably check out some of your videos as well. It looks very interesting.
Thanks.
So would always suggest subscribing.
He's got a great video I cited in the debate on Jonah and how Jonah wasn't swallowed by an actual whale, but this is just language referring to like the sea, basically. So, Ridvan looks like a Mexican cowboy with that mustache.
That's true. That's what I'm going for.
You're supposed to say, that's true, Essie.
That's true. Yeah. Okay.
No, say, that's true, senor.
Would Ahmed. AP, no flirt with IP's goatee. That's gay and haram. Well,
Yeah.
he can flirt with my goatee all he wants. I don't know.
I do whatever I want, pendejo.
Thank you guys for defending Christ, especially UAP. David, did you see Mike Winger wore a nerd shirt for y'all in his most recent stream? Y'all should collab.
Why does he need to wear a shirt when it's like obvious, right? It's like, I mean, I could, someone could walk around in a shirt and says, "I'm human." It's like, yeah, we know that, stupid. You don't need to say it. So Mike Winger nerd shirt, yeah, it's just like overkill.
AP, why are you not white?
How
dare you?
I tried to make my lighting brighter here, but it doesn't really work. I don't know. I could try next time. Yeah.
Do you like Cliff Nechtel, and will you have him on your show? I think I knew who that is. I think I was on his show once, but I have to look it up. I've been on a lot of different
He's
shows.
the
This
guy.
is so funny. I know who that guy is. David doesn't know who he is. You don't know who he really is. But
Oh.
I know who the guy is, although he's a Christian apologist and preacher.
Yeah, he's the
What's
guy. He's
happening?
got curly hair. He goes out and preaches with his son Stuart on college campuses. and
I
stuff
know
like that.
Stewart. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, they interviewed me one time. So, yeah, check that out then. Yeshua said to one thief, "Today you'll be with me in paradise," but I thought Jesus went to hell after he died. So what's your thoughts on this? So I did bring this up in the debate. This is relevant because Tahir was trying to argue that we say that the wages of sin is eternal torment in hell, which we don't say. No, my position is that Jesus, when he died, went to the Father. After the resurrection, there's this idea in Ephesians that he may have descended into hell to set captives free. It's also in 1 Peter 4, for example, this kind of idea. So it's not that he descends to hell to be tormented. It's he descends to, break open chains, the harrowing of hells, that phrase you've probably heard before, just releasing all of the righteous patriarchs and welcoming that kind of thing. IP uses irrefutable first century sources. True Islam, Muslim. Wordplay. Draw your own conclusion. Yeah, that was the thing. I'm just here's what the first century sources say, and he was like, no. Well, David, I'm not sure. You didn't catch it, but AP, do you remember at one point I just said, look, Jesus says he's going to die after the resurrection. If the Gospel of Luke is true, Jesus said he died and he rose. And Tahir's response was, well, maybe Jesus was wrong. Maybe he thought he rose and he actually didn't.
I know.
What do you do at that point?
That whole thing, when you brought up that evidence, which is a very clear evidence, you dealt with it you brought it up several times, and he dealt with it by either ignoring it or responding in very strange ways to it. That's, I think, very telling for those who have paid attention to the debate. How he deals just with that one specific argument that you bring up is very telling of the weakness of his position, I would say.
Yeah, you got to reinterpret it as the place of the dead, or just say Jesus was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But if Jesus was wrong, so you're telling me that literally everyone, including Jesus himself, thought that he rose from the dead, or thought that he had died, and not until you get to Mirza Ghulam Ahmad do we finally get someone who actually has the truth. Even it's not even in the Quran, the swoon theory, unless you interpret it in certain ways. So it's
and it's the Quran just misled people even further, according to the Ahmadis, because so Christians for all these centuries, they believe the first century Christians they all believe Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead. You get to Islam and Allah seeks to correct it, but he does it in such a confusing manner that people can conclude that Jesus was never even crucified and Allah disguised someone else and made him look like Jesus. And then that goes on for 13 centuries. And then Mirza Ghulam Ahmad comes along to clarify things for Ahmadis, and so it's just Allah. Allah keeps trying. And it's just like with the Quran, he sent one book and people didn't get it. He sent another book and he didn't get it and sent another one, another one. No one gets it until finally people get the Quran. And then the Ahmadis come on and say, no, actually, Muslims are wrong. People still didn't get it with the Quran. You had to get to Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. He's the only one who ever got it.
That's such a funny thing to me. Like Muslims will, so according to Muslims, Muhammad came and he was like, okay, guys, Allah didn't really, make his point very clear last time. So here it is. Here's what he actually meant. And then later, much later, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad comes along and he's like, okay, guys, so you have the Quran, but to be honest, Allah didn't really send his message across properly. So here is what he actually meant. Okay, well, thank you.
And then in the 21st century, he was like, all right, listen. The other guys didn't get it right. I sent this guy called Apostate Prophet. He is going to tell you exactly what it says. And then this is the final, absolute, 100% sure this time, final messenger.
Exactly. That's how it goes. Hey, Mike, what?
Thank you for becoming a new member. Appreciate that, Miss Apostate. But yeah, what were you going to say?
Yeah, that's very nice. Did he actually, during the debate, bring up a comparison or an objection? Because some people are mentioning it. I didn't catch that part. Did he actually bring up Adam being born of a virgin or something like that?
Yeah, I'll find that here in a second. Let me. Yeah, he actually made that argument with the Quran.
Wait,
Adam was born of a virgin. Yeah, it's in. He mentioned it.
Please play that.
If you take a literal reading of the text, I mean, dust particles are virgins.
They're virgins. They're virgin dust. Virgin dust particles.
Virgin olive oil. You can have virgin dust.
No one had sex with that dust because there was no one to hump the dust.
I think I got it here. This might be it. I might need to find it exactly because it came up a couple times. But let's see if this is it here.
You there, Michael? I'm the same.
Say two. Tahir, why is Jesus the second Adam?
He's the second Adam because Adam was born of a virgin too.
Virgin dust.
What?
Yeah,
Answer me, inspiring philosophy. Did the dust have sex? Yes or no?
Who was the? Can you tell us the name of the virgin? Who was the virgin?
The dust.
Who exactly?
It's Mother Earth.
Okay, I know this sounds very disrespectful when we sit here and just laugh about this right now, and that's okay, because this is ridiculous. Did this guy even think this through? How this even sounds, or did he check if this makes any sense or not?
I think he clarifies later. So let me go to this section here. I think he brings it up.
They're saying, maybe it's pronounced shaky. They say, well done, IP. God bless you. Lavelle says, who was Adam's virgin mother, please?
So the Quranic view is that Adam is not the first man. The Quranic view is that Adam is the first prophet of this cycle of humanity, and that there have been many, many cycles of humanity, each cycle being 7,000 years long approximately, and that the Adam of our particular cycle is the Adam of our particular cycle, and that before hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, there have been multiple cycles of humanity, and that the Quran says about Jesus, it says the case of Adam, in reference to the virgin birth in particular, it says the case of Jesus is as the case with Adam. God said to him, be, and he was. So the way in which Jesus was produced through a virgin birth is also the Quranic view on how Adam was produced.
Hold up.
Wait,
one last thing. Adam is described in the Quran as a Khalifatul Ard, which means a Khalifa or a successor in the earth, which means there were human beings who preceded him. It's just that they had not received divine revelation. He was the first in this cycle of humanity to receive divine revelation, to be appointed as a prophet.
Hold up. Is that what Ahmadis actually believe? Do they actually believe in this whole is in cycles of thousands of years of humans? Did they actually adopt some Eastern view on?
I think
humanity?
So. Yeah.
Honestly, I had no idea about this.
Yeah, that was all new to me. He's saying that the Quran would say that Adam is like the first prophet, and therefore he was a virgin birth as well. And it's like, okay, I can accept. That's clearly not what Genesis teaches. It doesn't say virgin birth. So, if it's in the Quran, fine. I'm not an expert on that. I don't know what you, David, and you, AP, would say about that.
It's definitely not in the Quran, and you would have to like do an insane twist onto the Quran and read into it to get such a conclusion out of it. But this is certainly not in the Quran. This is, I guess, an exclusively Ahmadi view, and it sounds like simply an adoption from Indian or Eastern religious thinking applied to Islam. But just the fact that he would treat this as common knowledge and respond to this question with, well, he was born of a virgin too.
Yeah,
It's
people.
just
That's the thing. People don't realize when you have whatever the leader of your group is and can just say whatever he wants and you guys all accept it, you get some really, really wild stuff. I mean, when I was having discussions with Nabil, he gave me a book. I forget if it was from Mirza Ghulam. I think it was from Mirza Ghulam Ahmed, but it may have been from one of the successors. The argument, you open the book and the argument is, if God were a trinity, then planets would be shaped like triangles, not like spheres. Spheres show that God is it emphasizes God's oneness.
That's a real argument he's used.
That's a real argument. That's a real argument. That's the level of arguments you get in this version of Islam. And once it's funny because once they say it, then there will be like 3 pages of boasting about how brilliant the argument is, and no one can refute this because of its divine wisdom and blah blah. It'll just be all this boasting and stuff. And for certain personality types, it just works. They go, "Wow, oh my goodness, it's so true. Wow, great point." And so if one of his leaders says, it's this endless cycles of, they'll go with it. They'll roll with it.
So I'm only learning this now. I had no idea, to be very honest. So a distinct Ahmadi belief, this kind of strengthens my whole idea that Ahmadiyya is, in some sense at least, I know, David, you will say not quite the same, but in some sense at least to Islam what Mormonism is to Christianity. But they actually do believe that there are 7 cycles of human history, and that we are currently in the 6th cycle, or that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad came to herald the coming of the 7th and final cycle or age of mankind, or something like that. This is very, very weird. This has nothing to do with Islam.
Yeah, it sounds very Hindu.
Yeah.
I also just want to know who the virgin was, though.
Hold on. I got a super chat on that. Someone sent a super chat. I was going to get to that one. Please tell name of Adam's virgin mother. Couldn't sleep. One was up all night trying to think about that.
Wow.
Oh man.
Wow.
We got another good one here. Thanks, AP. Feel free to tickle my goatee anytime. Who are your fans, AP? You need to answer about
they're the creepy. You're talking about the bottom of the YouTube barrel there.
They're the best. Man.
He's taking photos of us right now and sending in money. This sounds close to prostitution. I'm getting kind of worried.
This is creepy stuff. Yeah.
They are the best.
Like it says in the book, we're blessed and cursed. I'm not sure what that's specifically referring to.
Didn't he make a whole point about Jesus being cursed? If by your understanding, therefore Jesus is a false prophet. If he was indeed crucified.
Well, he tried to argue that the book of Deuteronomy says that so if someone is cursed, they're a false prophet. And I said where, and he admitted that he had misunderstood the passage. So props to him for being humble on that.
Book of Trust Me, Bro.
Oh, he actually did. He several times he cited Deuteronomy and claimed that it says that it proves that any prophet who is crucified is a false prophet. But then later on, IP actually called him out on it and asked him to read that. Then he noticed that it's not really there and said, "Okay, I made a mistake. To be honest, I mixed up 2 different things." He said.
which shows you that just the level of integrity he has is just well above people like Daniel Akikichu. It's just like, he's just like, hey, I made a mistake. And hey, props to you. That's a very honorable thing for him to say. And that should be noted. He should not be mocked for that kind of mistake. I mean, everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah, I admire that. Like, if it was Daniel Akikichu, he would just put this weird twist on what he actually said or actually meant and never acknowledge that he made a mistake. So.
Does IP know about my cute finger? I'm assuming David and AP know something about this.
Yeah, we're just talking to Matt Middleberg, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had Matt Middleberg on with us last night, and we were kind of going through his channel, and he was doing the thumbnails where he's like pointing to stuff, but you of course have AP's fans watching, so like, oh, look at his cute finger and all this crap.
It was a giant finger on the thumbnail. Like the first thing you notice is the finger, and you don't see anything else.
He's like that. And so, basically, AP's fans just pretty much ruin everything.
They make YouTube a better place, man.
All right. Is there any other notes you had, AP, that you wanted to get to? I can go to another clip. I had a note I wanted to get to, if not.
One issue that I have is just, I guess, so I made a note of how he needs to explain the virgin birth and why Jesus was born of a virgin, because the virgin birth plays an extremely significant role in Christianity, in early Christology, and the distinction between heretical sects and mainstream Christianity. But I made that note before I knew that these guys actually believe in those cycles of humanity, based on which he also thinks that Adam was born of a virgin, which is very weird. So not sure what to say about that now. But in general, I would say Muslims have to understand why Jesus was born of a virgin, because it doesn't make any sense, because that is basically evidence that he is the Son of God, according to a Christian view. When Islam adopts the view that he was born of a virgin, Islam has no explanation for this, and also rejects that he was born, that he was the Son of God. But I guess with Ahmadiyya having this weird worldview, that's, I don't know, makes things a little bit different.
Yeah, it does make it a little bit more interesting. But yeah, all right. I'm going to pull this back up here because where did everybody go? There we go. Okay. Play a little bit of this here because this is his some stuff he mentioned here I didn't get a chance to respond to.
Thanks very much. So thank you again, Michael, for your points. So the first point I want to make just from the outset is that, the Ahmadiyya founder, he was born in 1835, died in 1908, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who claimed to be the true second coming of Christ and to explain the actual reality of his life and death, and that Jesus died in Kashmir, and he identified his tomb as well in his book, Jesus in India. But he didn't say that this is a new idea. He actually said that this is the original understanding of the Christians, and that in actual fact, this was resurrected in a sense. This concept was demonstrated best by the Quran. And I showed you the verse, which...
So, you guys, I remember AP, you and David were talking about this a couple days ago. It's like with Muhammad could just say things. Oh, this is actually the way it was. Adam was a Muslim because Muhammad said so. Jesus was a Muslim because Muhammad said so. He's doing the same thing. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad came along and said that this is the original way the Christians understood everything. Therefore, we're right. Dude, you know how many groups do that? That's what Mormons do. That's what Jehovah's Witnesses do. That's what Unitarian Universalists do. That's what Muslims. Everyone does that.
And this might be something that I need to revisit because they never, ever, 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 ever seem to see the problem with it until you just go ahead and do it to them and then stick with it, right? So this would be like me saying, and I did this years ago. I made a video titled "I Believe in Muhammad," but I might want to just remake it and dial it up several notches. But it was, I made a video saying I believe in Muhammad, but I believe that he was a devout Orthodox Christian who believed that Jesus died on the cross for sins and rose from the dead and proclaimed the doctrine of the Trinity. However, his later, one of his companions decided to betray his teachings and had all of the Qurans burned in order to start his own version of Islam and to corrupt it and spread his heresy. And this was, of course, the Caliph Uthman. And we actually have sources on Caliph Uthman gathering all the Qurans together, burning them all, and so on. even according to Muslim sources, it's to cover up all the differences and so on. But, you know, I will say, I believe that they were covering up the true Trinitarian teachings of Muhammad, and this was all corrupted by Uthman. And so, yeah, I believe in Muhammad, and what I mean by I believe in Muhammad is I believe in the authentic Muhammad who preached Orthodox Christianity. And for some reason, at that point, they'll say, "Well, you can't just say that. You can't just make these. You can't just say these things." And suddenly they get it, and that's when you have to sort of build the bridge. Okay, now you know what we feel like. Every single discussion we have with you guys, you just make stuff up and say, "Oh, but the original was this," and you don't get how easy that is to do. And you could, by the way, you could do the exact same thing with Mirza Ghulam Ahmed.
There is, by the way, a book, a quite old book. It's called Dabistan in Mazabe, which is it's called The School of Manners, from Persian. I don't remember when exactly that is from, several centuries ago, but it is. It contains a section about Musaylima, who was a guy who lived in Muhammad's time, and who was initially acknowledged that Muhammad was a messenger of Allah, but later, according to the Islamic accounts, he rebelled by proclaiming himself to be a prophet as well after Muhammad died. And after Muhammad's death, the Caliph Abu Bakr, he waged war against all of the apostates, and they waged war against that guy as well and killed him. And he is now remembered as Musaylima the liar. But according to this Persian book, there was still a sect many centuries later, even a millennium later, that followed this guy Musaylima, and according to their teachings, Muhammad was a true prophet, but the Muslims corrupted his teachings completely and turned it into something very different that it is not, and that Musaylima was there to preserve the true teachings of Muhammad, and their source for that is, well, Musaylima said it, so it must be true.
Yeah, this is kind of a side note, AP, but if there's something called a book of manners, could you get your fans to read it? Because
I will.
You talking about this one, David?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Look at this, and look at what he says. Sorry, D-Wood, but I'm a born again Christian. He, which is exactly what we would expect a lying atheist follower of AP to say, right?
Atheists never lie. This is just proof that it's not an atheist.
Yes, I'm a Christian, and this is increasing my iman.
All right, I want to get into him bringing up here the sign of Jonah. That's why Than's here, because he's good on the whole book of Jonah,
which clearly states in the Quran that they did not kill him. In chapter 4 of the Quran, they did not kill him through qatalu, means to kill with a sword, or to kill but to slay, or ma salabuhu, nor did they kill him by crucifixion or crucify him to death in a sense and finish him through crucifixion. But he was made to appear to them. He appeared to them as so. Now that's clearly that's the Ahmadi position, and that's the original Quranic position. That's the original position of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And we believe the Quran wasn't written by Muhammad, but it was dictated by God to Muhammad, who then recited to his companions who wrote it down. The sign of Jonah, again, I want to go back and just emphasize this point. It's not the length of time. If I go on a holiday for 3 days and 3 nights, I haven't shown the sign. What is it that makes it a sign? You know, as I mentioned to you earlier, the sign of Jonah is mentioned, wicked and adulterous nation seeketh a sign, but no sign shall be shown to them except the sign of Jonah, right? It's mentioned in Luke 11, it's mentioned in Matthew 12, and it's mentioned in Matthew 16. And
oh my goodness.
Only in one of those particular times is the length of time mentioned. The sign, I want to go back to this. The sign is a person who should have died and was in a situation akin to death or very close to death, and who is then survives. And again, you cite the door.
So there we got the sign of Jonah again, which we have dealt with numerous times. And it's how many times do we have to quote what Jesus actually said here? For just as the Jonah was in the belly of the great fish for 3 days, so shall the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth for 3 days. What is that saying? The sign is that Jesus will be in a grave for 3 days and then come out, just like Jonah came out of the ocean. It's not this idea of survival. They keep adding that to the sign when that's not in there. I don't know how they keep reading that into there unless they're just ignoring what the text says.
Yeah, even if we wanted to grant the idea that Jonah survived the ordeal, that it still wouldn't follow what Jesus is trying to say here, because like you said in the debate, the whole point of what Jesus is trying to say is, just as Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and throat 3 nights, I will be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. Has nothing to do with what he thinks happened to Jonah.
And if you wanted to just pick and choose what you're interpreting extremely, what you're saying the parallel is, if you wanted to insist upon that and say, no, he's saying that however Jesus was over here, that's how Jonah was. And since Jonah was alive the entire time, therefore Jesus was alive the entire time, you would actually do that just completely in reverse. You'd point out what Mike was pointing out in his opening statement, that no, that the text of the book of Jonah says he went to Sheol, so he's dead. And so there have been Jewish interpreters who think differently on that. Some people believe Jonah was alive the entire time. Some people believe no, he died and was raised. But using their methodology, you'd have to say, okay, now we have an airtight case according to your reasoning to say that Jonah was in fact alive. If Jesus is drawing attention to that parallel, and we know how Jesus is interpreting what he meant, because he says over and over and over again, like a beating drum, that he's going up to Jerusalem to die. Therefore, he means he's going to die. And if he's drawing the parallel with Jonah, and you're saying that this is applying to his state of being alive or dead, that's what he's drawing attention to. You have to say, okay, then Jonah was dead. We have a knockdown case, because Jonah is debatable, right? It's ambiguous. It says he went to Sheol, but is that being used figuratively? You can use those kind of things figuratively. So you don't have anything definitive in the text to tell you have to interpret it this way. When you get to Jesus and when he's talking, you have definitive statements from Jesus to show that he's interpreting whatever's going to happen to him as him dying. He's going to die and then he's going to be raised. And so notice the methodology, because this is a huge problem in Islam. One of the fundamental principles of interpreting a text is using the clear to examine. You examine the unclear in light of the clear, right? So if you have an unclear passage that can be interpreted in other ways, but then you have a very clear statement over here, you don't take the clear statement and say, well, who knows what this means? Go to the ambiguous statement and say, we'll give this the interpretation we want, and then use that to reinterpret the clear statements. Muslims who are watching, understand this, because all your Dawah guys do this constantly, right? You'll have a clear statement over here on some issue, and you'll have an ambiguous statement over here, right? The clear statement always contradicts Islam. So they say, oh, the clear statement, that can't mean what it says. Well, why are you reinterpreting this crystal clear statement? I'm reinterpreting the crystal clear statement because it says this other thing over here in this ambiguous passage. You say, no, the ambiguous passage, it could be interpreted the way you're saying, but it couldn't be interpreted this way. And so you go with the clear verse, and they never do that. They go with the ambiguous, and then they give it their interpretation, and they use that to throw out any clear verses. But look at how they're doing that in multiple ways. Jonah, the book of Jonah, you could interpret this as Jonah actually being dead, because that's what he says, or he's just using that figuratively. And they'll give it they'll say, nope, it's figurative. He didn't die. He stayed alive the entire time. And therefore that's how we should interpret Jesus' words, even though Jesus himself repeatedly says that he's going to die. And so we're going to interpret this through the lens of our interpretation of Jonah. But even in the same text, they do it again. He appealed to Matthew 16. He said it. So Matthew 16, they're doing the exact same thing again. Matthew 16, verse 4, an evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. They say, you see, sign of Jonah, what's that mean? It means Jesus isn't going to die. He's going to survive the entire time. And you go down just a few verses, and then Jesus predicts that he's going to die again. Verse 21, from that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed. Same chapter, same exact chapter. Jesus says, I'm going to be killed and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you're not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. So in the same chapter, what they're doing with the whole story of Jonah, they're doing here as well. They're going to, so sign of Jonah, you could interpret that if you didn't know anything else about anything Jesus said or about the book of Jonah, you knew nothing about anything, you could interpret sign of Jonah the way they're doing it. And so notice they've got an ambiguous verse in terms of what exactly does Jesus mean by sign of Jonah? And they say, he means he's not going to die. And then you continue reading in the exact same chapter, and Jesus says, I'm going up to Jerusalem where I'm going to be killed. And Peter gives the exact same response Muslims give. No, you're not going to die. And Peter says, get behind me, Satan. And so, like, if that's not clear, I don't know what is, where Jesus says, I'm going to die. And one of his followers says, no, you're not really going to die, are you? And he says, get behind me, Satan. You can't be more emphatic than that. I'm going to die. Don't reinterpret it. Don't say I'm not. If you say I'm not, I'm gonna say you're actually serving Satan right now, and you don't even realize it. And so you've got as clear as a text can possibly be that Jesus is going to die. They'll ignore that. They'll go to earlier in the same chapter, sign of Jonah. What he's really saying is that he's not going to die, which he specifically calls satanic later in the exact same passage, and they just don't get it. It's if I didn't know anything about Islam, except that it made you think this way, this completely incoherent, inconsistent way, and forced you to violate the most basic principles of interpreting any text you're reading, I would say that's enough for me to think that this ain't from God.
David, what he said in Matthew 16 was not that he's going to die. He's just going to be mostly dead. That's what that means. He's going to be mostly dead.
Yeah.
No. But Than, like, you've done a lot on Jonah, for example, and it's like, this is something I encountered in Brant Petrie's book. He makes a pretty good case that when Jesus is appealing to the sign of Jonah, he's appealing to the same pattern of Jonah dying, coming back, and then what does Jonah do? He goes and he preaches to Gentiles. What do we see in the Gospels? Jesus dies, comes back to life.
Yeah.
Then the Gospels proclaim to Gentiles. Yeah.
The other thing is, okay, so there's a lot. I have no clue where I really want to start here. I will say this. I think probably we should be interpreting the Jonah account as Jonah dying. Especially if you take into account like ancient Israelite cosmology, right? They had the land under this. They had the Metsulah, or the deep, which is the chaotic waters, and then you have these pillars, and then you have like right under the land you have Sheol, the realm of the dead. And then when you read in Jonah 2:5-6, it says the waters closed over me to take my life. The deep, the Hebrew word there is tehom, which is just the chaotic waters, surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, at the roots of the mountains, I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever, yet you brought me up from life, from the pit. That's him being in Sheol. And the fact that he says you brought me up from life is just direct evidence for the fact that Jonah's dead here, that life is contrasted with death. The other thing I kind of wanted to point out is when Jesus talks about this in, let me pull up the verse here quick.
Matthew 12, I believe it is.
Yeah, I just kind of find it.
Wait, are you from Canada?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Me? No, I'm just weird. I'm from the Midwest.
He's from Wisconsin. He's close enough.
Yeah, that's close enough. They start talking like that too.
I just heard that like oat, and then I thought
oat. I thought the same thing. Oat.
Like immediate unsubscribe immediately. I thought, but yeah.
And then he was like, and then you brought it up, and then he was like, I don't know what you've heard about me, but I'm not Canadian, eh?
Stop! I hate myself so much right now. Matthew 12. I'm just trying to divert the attention away now. Matthew 12.
Isn't it dumb though that you're making a point and me and AP are both thinking the exact same thing? What if this guy's Canadian? He said about.
You can't trust anything I'm saying now.
He said,
Jesus says, then some of the scribes and Pharisees answered him, saying, Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you. But he answered them, an evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given except for the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation, condemn it, for they repented at preaching the Jonah, and behold, this is the important part, something greater than Jonah is here. Something that's really important to understand about Jonah is, especially once you take into account like the Chaos Kampf language, the Leviathan language, and all this other stuff in there. Jonah is made out to be an agent of chaos that needs to be delivered from this. And Jesus is saying, while Jonah had succumbed to chaos, had succumbed to evil, had succumbed to these things, something greater than Jonah you will see. And he's saying, I am that thing that's greater than Jonah. I will be the one that defeats death, suffering, the forces of chaos, and all these other things. So the very verse that he wants to appeal to actually, I would argue, contradicts the Christological implications that he wants to make out here, because I'm saying Jesus' appeal to Jonah here actually has massive Christological implications that Jesus is God incarnate.
Right, so it's something greater here. So you definitely have a higher thing there. But I mean, like, one of the things people don't realize is if you look in early Christian art that depicts Jonah, it doesn't depict him being swallowed by a whale, but by this sort of reptilian creature that is most likely the Leviathan. And Leviathan in the Bible is not an actual sea creature. It's the personification of watery chaos. Like Behemoth is the personification of the terrestrial land system. So I attended a lecture by Dwayne Garrett, and he said, we got to think of Behemoth and Leviathan not as like actual animals. Like they weren't dinosaurs. They're more akin to like Daniel's beasts in Daniel 4, for example. That's the way they're sort of viewed there. So when it says, when Jonah is being depicted as being swallowed by this great sea creature that's described with all this idiomatic language referring to Leviathan, they're not saying he was literally swallowed by a giant fish or a giant whale. Mm-hmm. He was just sort of swallowed up by the chaos of the sea. And if that's the case, he's not going to be like, as we think of like Pinocchio sitting in someone's stomach breathing oxygen, which wouldn't even happen in reality, because if you get swallowed in the stomach, you're going to die. So I don't understand the whole Muslim argument. They think that Jonah was surviving just in a whale's stomach. That never made sense to me as a Christian. And the text just seems to talk about Jonah dying. So that just seemed like the basic point that was being made, not that Jonah was surviving in a whale's stomach.
Yeah. If you want, I actually have the pictures of some early Christian depictions of the Jonah.
Oh, yeah. Let me add these to the screen here.
But it sounds much more fun that way.
Yeah. So, like, for instance, here...
I want to get swallowed by a fish.
This is a It would be fun. This is sarcophagus in the Church of Santa Maria. Stop.
No, I'm saying that could be like I'm saying like at like at Ken Ham's art place, there could be like a ride where a kid gets swallowed by a fish and then gets dropped off at a different place. You know what I mean?
You're gonna give him ideas now. Now we're gonna get that amusement park.
No, I want him to make a Leviathan roller coaster. But like you can see here, right? Like this is like a little dragon swallowing Jonah. The same thing here. Like now this one looks a little mammalian, and that there's explanations for that I won't get into.
Dinosaur.
But yeah, it's swallowing Jonah. Same thing here. There's this like weird mammalian dragon, sea dragon thing swallowing the boat.
What paper is this from?
This is hold on, let me bring it all the way up.
Is that Scott Nogel's paper?
Yeah, this is Nogel's paper. Nogel's paper is
like I have that. Yeah.
Jonah and Leviathan, Interbiblical Illusions and the Problem with Dragons.
Ah, yeah, I have that paper, yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really good paper. But yeah, long story short, there was no whale. There wasn't actually a creature that swallowed Jonah literally. It's just that in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament, you see chaotic waters, Leviathan, Satan, death, and Israel and Yahweh's enemies all kind of being morphed together into this entity of chaos and stuff like that. That's why you see, like, in Exodus account, Pharaoh is called the dragon. They're not that's like, they're not just calling him a cool name. It's because dragons and Tanin in general were symbols of chaos and disorder and evil and stuff like that.
Yeah, I tend to tell people, like, if you want to make a good analogy, it's like Mother Nature today. We don't think there's really some woman that lives in the forest. It's just a term for the personification of nature. Same with Leviathan.
Wait, there is no actual mother.
Yeah, IP just said no woman lives in a forest.
No,
He said
no,
no
'cause
woman
Adam was a
lives in a
virgin.
forest. Come on.
That was Adam's virgin mother. All right, let's see. AP, you got a super chat. Read more books, men, none in your background.
They are all
Think
in
he
my
needs your
head.
men.
Yeah.
There you go. There's your answer, Harris Palmer.
No, AP believes books are for losers.
I do.
He says, I guess referring to my Tahir from yesterday, a more trustable medical doctor than Zakir Naik, which yes, absolutely, 100%. I would trust my life with Tahir as a medical doctor far more than Zakir Naik.
Yeah, Zakir, I don't know if you saw it, Mike, but Zakir Naik says Homo sapiens went extinct, what was it, 100,000 years ago?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. Oh my God.
He heard it. Yeah, he got it from Dr. Whitemeat. He did. He says it.
Sir Whitemeat.
Sir Whitemeat.
Yeah.
So
And if you know Sir Whitemeat, yeah.
It's such an interesting situation because back in the day, you could say absolutely, the Dawa guys could get up and say absolutely anything. It didn't matter how stupid it was. And that's how you end up with Yusuf Estes saying the Catholic Church was founded 3 centuries before Christ by Alexander the Great in Rome, right? And you could just say these things all over, but people had those things recorded and then they start posting them all over the internet. And then they're in this awkward position of, oh, darn, because that famous clip from Zakir Naik, I mean, he just completely made up everything in the entire and that's how he would do it back in the day. You can make it up. The people who are watching it, they don't know any better. They're completely clueless.
Mm-hmm.
But if you know Sir Whitemeat,
is it?
The 2 giant angels carried him out of the tomb on their shoulders because he couldn't walk from the foot piercings just yet. Yes. That would be the explanation. Although I think Ahmadis actually say the 2 men in white were like Essenes that helped Jesus escape to India or something like that. Like
they were medical doctors.
Yeah. That's another weird thing. They say I was reading a lot of their literature. They say it's a fact that Nicodemus was a physician. And I am preparing for this debate. I am looking up whatever I can. Where on earth they're getting this from? I have no idea where they got this idea. That they thought Nicodemus is a physician that healed Jesus by covering his body in aloes.
I can tell you where they got that from.
One of their guys said it.
I can tell you where they got that from. They got that from the idea that Jesus must have been somehow healed, therefore he was a physician. Clear proof. See.
And if you say IP that physicians at that time would not have been able to deal with it, then they would say he's a time traveling physician from the future who came back.
Yeah.
Whatever you need to do in order to justify the claims of.
If you reject this, it is just because of your Christian bias.
Yeah, you're a biased dude.
Yeah, that's another thing he did. He's like, well, like I brought up Frederick Zuckerbein. He's like, well, is he a Christian? I'm like, I'm pretty sure he is, but I mean, like, he's still a medical doctor. I could just dismiss everything you're saying. He's just like, well, that's just your Ahmadi bias.
Well, you would say that is just his Ahmadi bias because of your Christian bias. See?
That's true. There you got me there. James and
IP admits he's a biased bigot. That's the clip right there.
James did not read some of my super chats. I refuted his don't say 3 Neapolitan ice, cream, 1 essence, and 3 distinct flavors, chocolate, strawberry, vanilla. Boom. That's not partialism at all, for sure. Excuse my ignorance, but how would you prove that Jesus actually existed if he performed miracles? Well, I mean, these would be different questions. We don't have to argue that Jesus existed and performed miracles. We can argue he existed, and then we can ask the question, did he perform miracles? So most atheists would believe Jesus was a real historical person. Most scholars actually believe Jesus was known as an exorcist, and he did certain healing things, whether it was miraculous or just some sort of like placebo effect or something. I remember reading Tony Costa on this. So you can believe Jesus was a real historical person. People may have believed he did miracles without actually believing he did those miracles, like an atheist would. So it's not really that those two things have to exist. We as Christians would argue that Jesus rose from the dead, and there's evidence to support that as evidence that he is who he said he was and that he did the things he said he did.
Yeah, I must say, some atheists would fall into this whole, this emotionally invoked response to Christianity that Jesus never existed, that there is no proof or anything like that. To suggest that Jesus never existed is in itself baseless. There would be very little basis to argue that Jesus was never real, that Jesus never existed, that it's a fictional figure. This is actually an instance where we have more evidence for the fact that he did exist than we have for him not existing. So you would have to actually make a case for his non-existence, which you would probably fail to make. So that's probably not a very good response. We have a lot of figures in history that we say existed, although we don't have photographic evidence, or we don't have like the evidence that such an atheist would demand from you. With much less evidence, we accept those figures as true, and there is no reason for us to reject those. The historicity. Jesus is one of those. We accept that he historically most likely did exist. The discussion is more around what he actually did and said.
Yeah. I think his views on Jesus is Jewish mysticism in him in India and his sect, not a Messiah, not Jesus or reincarnation, Jesus and their sect's Messiah figure. I have Joshua Wooden. I have no idea what you're trying to say here.
Look, yeah, I can tell you because it's a perverted follower of AP, but
that is actually your.
Notice he puts the word sects in all caps. That's because AP has a historically perverted mind. And AP, true or false? We'll be sitting here talking about, and I'll say, the various sects of Islam, and you'll go, you said sex. You said sex.
What do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, everyone watching knows.
I have no idea. The funny is, Joshua Wooden yesterday came to argue for Christianity and against my stuff. And I said, upon something that he said, I said, no, Joshua, you're a joke. I misspoke. And I said, no, I was sorry. No, I didn't mean that. I mean, that is a joke. And now he changed his name to Joshua Wooden, the joke.
The joke said AP.
Yeah.
Super chat from Jai Apologetics. I appreciate Jai helping me prepare for the debate beforehand. Thanks for sending in the super chat. We've got Joshua Wooden back. He says James also skipped a super chat about him saying, read it plainly. I said historically in literary context helps understand what you read basic hermeneutics right. Okay, thanks. It's hard because I don't know the context of the original super chats, what you were saying, Joshua. So DC says, why did God say to Abram, now I know that you fear me.
Abram.
Jehovah Witness told me. Abram, now I know that you fear me. A Jehovah Witness told me God chose not to be all-knowing. Love you guys. God bless. So you have anthropic language throughout Genesis of God basically revealing certain things to his to the prophets and the patriarchs in the Old Testament. I don't think it's this idea that he was not all-knowing, because you have also earlier verses throughout Genesis where it appears God is all-knowing. This is more about Abraham passing the test and what the original Hebraic language says. Than, do you know anything about the whole issue of the Isaac sacrifice in that issue?
Well, there's also the issue that there's a know in the Bible doesn't just refer to having a specific kind of knowledge or something like this. It can refer to a kind of experiential knowledge. Like it will say, and Adam knew his wife. It's not saying he knew her, he knew about her or something like that. It has multiple senses, but there is this kind of experiential knowledge. Like now I've seen it. Now I've seen it.
Yeah, Heiser says something similar to that vein, but I haven't really dug too much into some of these pericopes to have an in-depth.
Yeah, I'm
opinion
trying to
like they would
remember
about
what I
Jonah.
heard on that, but I think it's what David was kind of saying. It's like an experience, but I'd have to double check to give a more thorough answer on that.
So that's what
Quick
talking
question.
about Abraham, and you are talking about Abraham.
Yeah, we don't even know. Yeah, IP goes off on this big tangent. He can't answer the question. IP fails to answer a question about Abram, changing subject to Abraham.
Opposed.
Dodging.
Quick question, philosophers and apostate philosopher. What fallacy is it called? Giving false analogies to make your point. False equivalency. I think it's a false analogy is actually the name of the fallacy.
Yeah, that is actually, yeah.
Hello, I have seen God's memes format misused at times. It goes non-Christian, negative trait, their belief system. Christian, positive trait, Christian. When it's reversed, it's horribly, logically fallacious and offensive. I mean, everyone makes offensive and ridiculous caricature type memes. Not sure what you're specifically referring to.
What memes are memes are very academically advanced, reliable sources to acquire information from. I don't know what you're talking about.
If you're Daniel Pikachu, yes.
It is an easy thing to do. It's like David Wood, Christian, not a cannibal. Jeffrey Dahmer, atheist, cannibal. Draw your own conclusions.
Exactly. Which proves that cannibalism is good. Yeah.
David Wood IP, do you ever go to Christian events in the UK? There might be one in the works for the summer that it's nothing's been announced, but there might be something in the works on that for me. I don't know if David's got anything planned.
No, I hate the UK. It's gross. Can't stand their stupid voices over there.
Hi, mate, what are you talking about?
They don't put the in front of hospital, and it annoys me. They always say, "I'm going to hospital."
I'm going to hospital. What is this stupid language?
Hey, hospital today, mate.
And it's weird.
What's going on then?
And you know, it's weird. So I was over there, and then you go into McDonald's and you order some French fries, and they say you want salsa or mayonnaise with that. You're like, what the? Wait, what?
What?
Salsa or mayonnaise? How are those? How are those the options? Anyway, people were asking me various questions, and I'll just say, yeah, 230 pounds. Wait, do you guys know what pounds are? I'm not talking about money. Do you know what pounds are? And they're, yeah, we know it from watching movies. We know what you're talking about. And it's like, well, how do you guys not learn to speak properly then if you're watching our movies? Anyway, weird stuff.
It's a good point. Tries to use the Bible to show Jesus didn't die. Also believes that the Bible has been corrupted. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dawa. Yeah, that is something that happened in my debate with Tahir. It's this idea that he's got to treat the Bible as authoritative to some degree when it talks about blood and water coming out of the side or Jesus giving the sign of Jonah, but only in the places that confirm his Ahmadi belief. Mm-hmm. All other places, he even said this when I brought up Luke 24. Well, that's been added, and he mentioned it in other places. We know the Bible's been interpolated. And it's like, well, then this is just circular reasoning. Every part that confirms your beliefs you say is valid, but any part that doesn't, that can be interpolated. It's just a circular argument. It doesn't actually support you at all. But this is often what you get from Muslim apologists. Just anytime the Bible confirms the Muslim belief, that's authentic. That's original. Yep. But if it doesn't, well, that was changed by the evil Paul.
Yeah, so exactly the same thing that you find with, they'll say, anytime you quote the Bible to refute Islam, nope, it's been corrupted. But look at all these verses. We can say this is about Muhammad. Okay, well, let's finish reading the passage because the verses right after it prove that this can't be about Muhammad. Oh, those parts have been corrupted. So it's just, again, this goes back to if your position requires you to be completely inconsistent and incoherent and hypocritical all day long and to commit every logical fallacy known to man in order to justify your position, you probably need a new position.
David, I'm not entirely familiar with what the Ahmadi view is, but do they actually have the position that the Bible has been, or the biblical scriptures have been actually corrupted the way Muslims in general think, or do they think that that it is still authentic and reliable, but that there is a Christian spin on it or something like that?
As far as I don't know what Mirza Ghulam Ahmed said, but every Ahmadi I've talked to, they'll start quoting the Bible and they'll use it and use it and use it until you get something that definitively refutes what they just said, and then that's been corrupted. And matter of fact, this was when I'm talking to people, I'm looking for like signs of light in their heads. Like, is this person actually able to think clearly about this? And I was over in Nabil's, and we were discussing Jesus crucifixion. We had read something and prepared our cases, and we're gonna basically lay the evidence side by side for Jesus died versus didn't die. And towards the end, I ended up having a discussion with his dad, and his dad is pointing to various verses, making claims and so on. And then I said, well, why don't you read this verse? Because that says the exact opposite. And his dad goes, oh, but this has changed. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, so it's the same thing as everyone else. But then Nabil actually goes, well, Dad, is it fair for us to quote their scripture to them to prove our point, but they can't quote their own scripture to prove the opposite to us? And his dad goes, oh, we'll discuss that later. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's cool that Nabil is actually spotting, because again, he really respected his dad, but he's able to see that inconsistency. Wait a minute, how come we can quote their Bible whenever we want as authoritative, and the moment they say, well, let's take a closer look at what it actually says, we say, no, it's been changed. It's good that you see that, because I mean, that's just standard in Islam. I mean, that is standard. We look at that and we think, when people have a methodology like this, and I'm just going to go through here, I'm going to cherry pick whatever agrees with me. Anything else in there, I'm going to say it's been changed. Anyone could do that. I could do that with the Quran. There are verses I agree with in the Quran. I could go to those and say, see, that was in the original Quran. Everything else was changed by someone else. All the stuff I disagree with, that was all changed. Now prove me wrong. You can't, because it's not like you have some original manuscript or something like that. You don't. If I'm saying it was changed later, I can say that. Anyone can say it. But it's just, we think of people who do that sort of thing as like, dude, you're so biased and clueless. You don't even, I mean, you don't even realize how stupid your methodology is. We think that's, but it's the rule in Islam. It's not, here's some person who doesn't understand basic, basic how to interpret a scripture and so on. It's not that. It's just standard in Islam. Again, why can't you find a Muslim who has a consistent methodology that he can apply consistently to get his conclusion? Because you can't have that. It doesn't exist, because there is no coherent position.
Well, this is the most racist thing I've ever heard. David is basically saying
you're racist. And all Turks are racist.
David is saying Muslims can't understand it because they're not white. That's what he's basically saying here. Wow, man.
Clip it. AP's attacking white people because he's Turkish.
What? You are all great. The AP and David Wood communities are congregating with IP. How is all your reading going? How is all of your reading going in Ecclesiastes? JK, he projected IP as bias. Yeah. It's when you're debating someone and their argument boils down to, well, you're just biased, or you just have a Christian bias. The debate is over. You've won. They basically admitted defeat if they just have to start trying to poison the well. That's what I found.
Yep.
Sus AP says, Stan's accent is beautiful.
A boot.
This comment is grossing me out.
Grossing me out. Yeah.
You're all a bunch of hosers, you know.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for becoming a channel member. I discovered Sham Timon today with God Logic. His style of polemics is great, extremely funny, and extremely informative, polemically and apologetically.
You discovered Sam Shamoon today? What?
Just today? Like, man, wow.
That's interesting.
The Virgin Bert, Allah excuse to blow and to marry Bert V. AP, what's wrong with your fans here? I don't get this at all.
Yeah. No, that's the Islamic view that Allah blew into Mary's. It says he blew into her farj, which is the word for vagina. It means like opening and so on. But yeah, they've tried to interpret that differently, like blew into the opening of her garment and so on. But anyone just sitting there reading in Arabic, Allah had to blow into Mary's vajayjay, which Allah doesn't need to do, because keep in mind, he could just say be and it is. He doesn't need to go do anything, but the Quran says no, he went and blew into her vagina.
He had to blow.
So he did that by choice.
He had to blow.
I gotta go back and read the Quran again, man. I have missed so many things but I'm sure it's translation stuff. Like they don't want to just put that in there. It's, oh boy. IP's voice is cracking. There are signs. Don't tell Daniel.
Good point.
IP bookshelf for his books. If there are signs, there are signs, and I'm not in puberty yet. IP bookshelf for his books. Christian, ER
hey.
bookshelf on his. Who's ER?
Hey, IP.
Oh, exploring reality, right?
Yeah, I was just sitting there waiting. I wasn't gonna give it away to you.
I'm like, wait, who is? There's no Eric here. What's going on? I don't know who this ER is.
This is
David.
This is a great act of disrespect. Yeah.
I am a Christian.
AP pile books in a pile. Atheists, draw your own conclusions. AP's been exposed.
Yeah.
AP.
To be fair, Mike has a pile of books in his background and
that's a shelf. That's a shelf. Watch. See, it comes
whoa!
off.
That's
whoa! Okay.
Yeah,
you tricked us all. You tricked us all.
David Woods Finger says hospital in a British accent. Forgot to add the in front of it.
Nice.
No, it's just
finish these out. Hi, as a Catholic, I still don't know if Jesus is God or is just the Son of God. Too many contradicting opinions out there to decide one way or the other. Yeah, Jesus is God. Again, you can go to I just posted a video on Instagram and TikTok today. If you want to check that out, it gives you a bunch of different verses where Jesus is God, but he's the second. In Christian theology, we also note that he comes from the Father because Jesus says he came from the Father, but he also says he's God multiple places, like John 8:58, Matthew 7:15. The opening chapter of Mark 1 says that he is Yahweh who's come in the flesh, basically. But he comes from God, but he also claims to be God. So this is where the doctrine of the Trinity comes out of. We're trying to explain what the scriptures teach when it says that he comes from the Father who is God, but it is also God. Well, you get two persons of the Trinity there.
Yeah, and I would just shameless plug on this. I had the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 videos on my channel, so 4 months worth of videos except for one, is all dedicated to like novel argumentation for Jesus being God in Mark's gospel. It's to the audience of the gospel authors, it just would have been explicit and obvious because Jesus is putting himself in places that only Yahweh would be in the Old Testament.
Yeah. Timothy used a meme correctly. Thank you for your wisdom, sir. This is respectful and wise. Only people who agree with me may use this meme.
There's, by the way, a whole interesting perspective from an atheist point of view, which Bart Ehrman has. And I don't want to misrepresent him here, but either of you, I don't know if you have read his stuff, might be familiar with it. But his whole opinion is basically that according to the gospel text as you have it, and according to the epistles, the New Testament in general, it is quite obvious that Jesus is perceived as God, and one of the signs of that is the entire narrative of his death and resurrection, and then ascending is him becoming immortal within the cultural context, or him being immortal in the cultural context, and being immortal in the cultural context is directly synonymous to being divine, and that this is a clear sign within the context back then, although it might not be very clear today to the average reader, that he is perceived as God.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that. I'm going to have Michael F. Bird on my channel actually next week. We're going to be covering a lot of that kind of stuff. I think we'll be live Thursday. My family testified a neighbor who had HIV died and came back to life in his name, healed. She still walks around with the pics from when she was sick. Interesting. Can't really speak to that if I don't know the context, but it's good to hear that someone is not suffering from that. Why did he turn the donkey flight into a dream? Yeah, so David and AP, I don't know if you caught this part, AP, but somebody asked a question about the flying donkey, and Tahir said, well, that was just in a dream.
Yeah, that's exactly what you should say.
That's what I also say it was a dream, but
yeah, he didn't actually leave his bed, so it has to be some sort of vision or dream.
Yeah.
But your average Muslim believes that it's like, you know, the never-ending story, and he's flying around on this thing.
So the mainstream traditional Islamic view on that whole issue is that it literally happened, but that it was a miraculous event, which is why he, despite spending an extremely long time being on the back of that horse, donkey guy thing, and going to heaven and then down, it happened for a very long time. But when he came back, very little time had passed, and this is a miraculous, and it actually did happen. Then there is a minority view which was held among some, especially the mysticist crowds and some other interpreters who didn't take everything too literally, that this was just a vision or something metaphysical or metaphorical. And I read before that Ahmadis have often interpreted this as not something that literally happened, but something that inexplicably in some parallel world or in some vision occurred. So it's expected that somebody would like to hear would go for the idea that this did not actually happen, but that it was a vision or a dream, which is also funny because that's the exact thing that I would say. It was just a dream. He took it too literally. So, yeah.
That makes far more sense than him actually flying a donkey monster to Jerusalem before going up to heaven.
Yeah.
Your opponent was saying, just read it plainly. When you would explain context, he doesn't see how context is needed to understand the scripture. Yeah, that's a thing you get from a lot of Muslim apologists. Like they'll read one verse and they're like, yes, this supports my position. But then you read the context and you're like, what are you talking about? This doesn't support at all what you're saying. And he kept telling me to just like read it plainly, but he doesn't want to read what it plainly says in the Gospels that he was also citing. It doesn't make any sense. Any of you guys read the Gospel of Judas? Yeah, I've read it. It is a wild trip for sure.
I read it way back when it became an issue. So you're talking what, like 2006 or something like that? Way back in the day.
It was
that recently came up
within a few.
Yeah, we read some of it. It was it's Gnostic idiotic nonsense.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, we read some of it, and it's very.
It's powerful.
It's not. It sounds nothing like actual Christian texts. So
does not sound like a carpenter talking to some fishermen.
Mm-hmm.
you see, guys, AP does read books.
It's very small. It's just the biggest book I've ever read.
We actually made him read something live during a live stream. Other than that, he never would have touched it.
It's the biggest book I've ever read, and I only read this because they asked me. I would never read it myself. I still have no idea what this even is. Yeah.
So I want to just let you guys know, if you guys need to take off at all, that's fine with me. I think we reviewed most of. If there's any other parts of the debate you guys wanted to review, we can do that. If not, I was going to finish out super chats, but don't feel like you have to stay because I know we've been gone for like 2 hours now. He has to stay. All right, AP's stuck here, I guess. God bless you all. I'm an Arab ex-Muslim to Christianity. Welcome, brother. Glad to see you. We're in the kingdom now. That's always good to see. This is Alhamdulillah. Exactly. Alhamdulillah. If you visit the UK, please don't shave your goatee. I am not visiting the UK now. I will never, ever come to the UK now after this super chat. It's just not going to happen. Hey, IP, will you defend the reliability of Daniel? Yeah, so I'm going to do some stuff on Daniel eventually. Right now, my pastor is actually doing a Bible study series on Daniel. And I've been recording them all, and I've been listening to help prepare. Because I want to not only do some videos on the reliability of Daniel, I want to do videos on commentary on Daniel. But that's all in just preliminary phases right now. I probably won't get to it this year. I got a lot more research to do on that. But yeah, there's some stuff I'll do on that for sure. Why did Jesus grew in knowledge if he was Yahweh, and how is it consistent with the Trinity? Please say Moro to Than for me. Sam, what does that mean?
It's
It means
oh, gosh.
It means maple syrup.
No, it means hello in
Wisconsin?
I think it's Swiss. It's Swiss.
Canadian, Canada.
No, he's from somewhere in Europe. I forget where he's from. Shoot, I feel like a jerk now. But Moro,
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
you got to remember what Paul says in Philippians 2, that Jesus emptied himself and became took the form of a servant. So Jesus empties himself. He was not omniscient at that point, is what a lot of Christians would argue. Some might still argue he was. It depends on which theologian you talk to. But I think Paul in Philippians 2 is kind of clear that Jesus empties himself and then grows back into the messianic figure he does become.
Yeah, and it's going to depend on how you're interpreting the incarnation, but when Jesus was a baby, do you think does someone actually think that he was sitting there thinking, well, here I am, creator of the universe, and I'm kind of stuck here for a while, and I have to pretend I'm goo-gooing and gaga-guying and so on.
Of course.
I have to, this is what I have to do. I'll just wait, and then later on, 30 years from now, then I'll show everyone, I really, I know what I'm talking about. So is he like, is he just like, or does he actually like take on the nature of a human being and function as a baby and as a toddler and so on? And if so, then you'd be increasing and growing in knowledge.
That's why the Muslims say, as also some of the infancy gospels say, that Jesus started talking and saying, "Hey, I was sent by Allah," when he was a little baby.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
David, did you see Mike Winger made a video wearing the shirt that
Already
said "nerd"? No, that's
Yeah.
a different one, but yeah, same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Earlier
I haven't seen that video, but you have to give credit where credit is due. When people are honest, like, I'm honest about my criminal past, and Mike Winger's honest about being the biggest nerd any of us have ever encountered in our entire lives.
For sure. Here we go. Will you be watching the upcoming debate between Jay Dyer and the Muslim metaphysician? Yeah, I
when is
plan to. That's going to be mid-February. I think it's February 16th, somewhere around that time.
Wait, Jake is actually going through with the debate?
Yeah, I found out they delayed it because they were waiting for a paper to come out, and now they're going to go through with it.
February 17. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah,
that's got to be good.
It's interesting that he's going through the debate, because he's challenged me to multiple debates. I've accepted them all, and he's always backed down. And then he goes and he posts, "David is running from me." Like, I agree to every single debate you challenge me to. You have backed down from every single debate that I agreed to do with you. How am I running? Anyway, so welcome to Dawah, ladies. Welcome to Dawah. Anyway, good to see him actually doing a debate.
Yeah. Thank you for becoming a member. Thank you for gifting 10 philosophy memberships. I'm not sure how that works or who gets them, but much appreciated. I am nice. An AP fan. Even if I am a joke, I am a Woody first.
You see?
The zinger.
In your face.
Okay. If the trajectory of agreed authenticity continues of Sahih,
pretty good.
2013, 2020, 2023. I'm not sure what that refers to.
You are now officially part of the community, IP. That was a very good performance.
Trajectory of agreed authenticity of Sahih, 2013, 2020, 80%, 2023, 77%. Mm-hmm.
I guess they're going to say it's going to be less authentic. There's going to be less sections of it will be authentic over time. AP or IP, how was Jesus in the beginning like before creation? Hold on, where'd that go? How was Jesus in the beginning like before creation, the Word of God or Son of God? What does it mean that Jesus as the Son of God in a unique way? Please provide references. Well, none of us know what Jesus was like before the incarnation because we've not experienced that reality, that plane of existence. It's just something beyond our knowledge. What does it mean that Jesus as Son of God in a unique way? So depends on the context. So if you're going to go to like John 3:16, Jesus is talking about his sonship as like some sort of unique relationship he has with the Father in that way. And if you read the context, it's because he came down from heaven. He brings a specific message that is unique. Other times when Jesus just says, "I'm the Son of God," that's often just a messianic term. So you got to look for various references to see what Jesus is referring to. When Jesus calls himself the Son in John 3, that seems to be a reference to his divine nature, not a messianic title specifically. But there are times where it depends on the context of what Jesus is referring to. So,
hey, does posting a link work? Like if I post this link, is it going to work?
Yeah, probably.
Did it work?
Where in the live chat?
Yeah, I posted a link. I made a video going through the different meanings of Son of God in the Bible and how Jesus is using some of them in the same way, and especially with things that could apply to other people, like the kings of Israel, the descendants of David, and so on, being sons of God, and blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God, and so on. There are different senses in which you can be sons of God, and then I get to ways where Jesus is clearly completely unique as the Son of God. So anyway,
yeah,
I don't know if this is related or not. I didn't know we can, so I'm gonna just do that too. I have a video I'm putting into chat about why John 1:1 calls Jesus the Word of God.
Yeah. It says IP, your Moon Knight analogy is not partialism. No, because I'm not saying Jesus is like a physical part of God, like he makes up 33% of God. You're appealing to philosophy of mind and how they're all fully God, just like all the persons of Moon Knight are all fully Moon Knight, even without being the other person. So you can't use partialistic language that would be heretical in philosophy of mind, because parts of your the way we talk about parts in the mind is not the same we talk about physical parts. Like your consciousness does not make up just a part of your mind. Your memories don't make up a part of your mind in that they fill up a certain percentage. So because there's a distinction between mental things and physical things, it definitely is not partialism. You all heard him. IP says he defended Daniel Hakikachu. Did I? I have no idea what you're referring to there.
When he talked about when he said an 11-month-old baby is fair game if you get parental consent, and IP was like, "Good point, good point."
No, I think this is a joke about how you said earlier that you will defend the authenticity of Daniel or something like
that. Oh, they tricked you. Hey, IP. Do you agree that Daniel is reliable? And you're like, yes, of course I agree that Daniel's reliable. I will defend Daniel. Aha!
Clip it. That's exactly the same thing that I thought when you were talking about Daniel earlier. So yeah.
Oh man.
See.
AP, David Wood, William Lane Craig recently had strong words against Islam in a video. Ayan Hersey Ali conversion to Christianity, calling Islam evil, Allah dictator, a lot more, maybe worth going through. I don't know if you guys want to tackle that.
That sounds extremely Islamophobic.
Where is that? Someone sent me that link.
That sounds very Islamophobic. I'm not sure if I want to do that.
I like William Lane Craig making fun of Islam.
Just Google it. You can probably find it. IP didn't know the greatest sheik was. Will IP be a man, not a weakling, and make a debate challenge to the most honorable sheikh, Shake Your Booty? I challenge Shake Your Booty to a shaking contest.
Are you sure? I will.
Hey, it's called a twerking contest.
I will let him know. I hope you don't back down now. Yeah.
Do you believe baptism is required for salvation? It depends on the context. I think if you are saved and you don't get baptized, then that would be a sign that you are not. If you are in a position where you can't, then that's a different story. Yeah, it depends on who you are and where you are in your situation in life.
Powerful.
I gotta bounce. My family's here.
I gotta bounce.
Now I'm gonna leave before I make a fool of my pseudo Canadian self even more.
Get a bounce.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
David,
no worries,
David
thanks.
AP, it was nice meeting you.
Yep,
It was very nice meeting you, and I will subscribe to your channel and watch your stuff.
Thanks,
And
man.
despite the fact that you speak like a Canadian,
I'm gonna fix it. I will fix it next time. If there's a next time that we get together, I will fix it, and I will sound like a Southerner. Okay.
Awesome.
That'll be worse.
No,
Just tell me what you want me to sound like. I'll start training.
Pittsburgher. I want you to get a nice, thick Pittsburgh accent. It's hard to do.
I'll work on it. All right, guys. Catch you later.
See ya.
Would you see the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Off to Tim Hortons, eh?
Man, I'm so glad the guy's gone. So glad the guy's gone. He was so annoying, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, looks
would
like
you see the dead?
looks like there's actually I looked it up. Looks like there's two parts. William Lane Craig talking about Ayan Hirsi Ali. One is 18 minutes and one's 25, so be a little long to cover in a live stream, but I might watch it and find some relevant parts. Could be interesting.
Inshallah.
Yeah. Would you see the Dead Sea Scrolls as consistent W to the data on New Testament? If not, what are the main problems with the Dead Sea Scrolls concerning the incarnation? I don't think there's anything in the Dead Sea Scrolls concerning the incarnation because it's copies of their own teachings and copies of the Hebrew scriptures, as well as some of the pseudepigrapha in there as well. So not really sure if that's relevant to the incarnation. Which gospel gets you foremost? I'm touched by John. AP, what gospel gets you the most?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I'd like Matthew. It's still my favorite to this day.
Yeah, I like I could say I like them all, especially, but for completely different reasons. Like I could say I like this one for this, and I like that one for that, and I prefer this one for this.
Yeah. You two must celebrate the Hafs Quran 100th birthday. If everyone celebrates, Muslims will realize their book is younger than my grandpa.
Yeah, we are going to we're going to do something on that. I think the anniversary is sometime this summer, like in June or something like that, and that's the anniversary of it's just amazing. So for centuries they had different Arabic Qurans in different parts of the Muslim world, and then the Ottomans were running things, and the most popular version of the Ottomans became the dominant one in Egypt, and then they decided to put out a standardized version, and they spent years working on a standardized version that they then released in Egypt. It became known as the 1924 Cairo edition, and this got spread around as like the official Quran version. And a few decades later, Muslims started saying, "Oh, there's only one Quran. There's only ever been one Quran, perfectly preserved down to the letter from the time of Muhammad." They like just made up their lie, when in reality, the one they were defending as the only one is just something that came out in 1924. So we actually have, since this is 2024, we have the birthday of the Quran that Muslims thought was the only Quran. And so we're going to have a big birthday 100-year centennial birthday celebration of the birth of their Quran.
Nice.
D Wood, we need our Mo Money mockery fix. Is vocab okay?
Momed mockery fix. Is vocab okay? Oh yeah. Yeah, vocab's fine.
Okay. I had an atheist claim to me that the Moabite king in 2 Kings 3 was able to defeat Israel's God by sacrificing his son to his God. What are your thoughts? So I got a video on this called "Was Yahweh Defeated by Another God?" I did it about a year or so ago. And no, that's not what's going on. There was a scholar named Drew Holland who wrote on this and notes that Mesha, the Moabite king, is not sacrificing his son to sort of win the battle. He's sacrificing as an act of atonement to apologize to Israel. And Israel is allowing for this sacrifice, so they're participating in it. And Drew Holland argues from the cultural context this was a common theme. And this would mean Israel was participating in a human sacrifice. So God chases them out, unleashes his divine wrath. So a lot more on that. Check out that video I did on my channel a while back. IP, do you believe John is independent of Mark? Yes, for the most part. I think he was aware of it, but I think he's writing his own account. Do you have similar beliefs to the Baptists? Maybe. I don't talk about my denomination.
The Baptists believe that Jesus died on the cross. Do you believe them?
No, of course not. They never would. Can non-virgins get married out inside the church? Yeah. Why wouldn't they be able to? Not go to some creepy fundamentalist Baptist church.
What about extra virgin?
No extroverts in the church. We don't allow them in.
Oh.
Did you say extra virgins or extroverts?
I said extra virgin.
Oh, no. What is an extra virgin?
I don't know what is extra virgin olive oil.
Yeah,
They-
Popeye's
they
wife.
wear 10 purity rings. You have to be an extra virgin. You got to wear 10 purity rings.
Yeah.
Thank you all of you. I don't have 200K to get a minor philosophy and something in theology. Counter cult polemics. I live in Illinois, 28 years old, not Canadian. Cool.
It's good you're not Canadian.
Excellent.
Nice.
All right, with that, we will close this out. Thank you, AP and D Wood, for coming. Sorry there was a Canadian here. Not sure how that happened. He must have
Apology
snuck in.
not accepted.
Just give us a warning
Border
next
Patrol
time.
these days. Freaking Border Patrol, not like when the Canadians get through. So. All right.
Yeah.
Are you guys going live on your channel tonight? Or one of them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Which one?
We're gonna do it for Canada. AP's channel. We'll be on AP's channel.
Yeah.
All right,
my
everyone
channel.
go to AP's channel. Get ready for the stream tonight. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for watching the debate. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you all next time.